네, 안녕하세요. 전태일 50주기 국제포럼, 전태일 이후 50년 함께 고민하는 노동의 미래 3일차 오후 행사를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 저는 오늘 3일차 오후 글로벌 공급사슬 밑바닥에서 일하는 사람들이라는 제목으로 진행되는 오후 세션의 진행을 맡은 아름다운 청년 전태일 50주기 범국민 행사위원회 학술위원장을 맡고 있고요. 민주평등사회를 위한 전국 교수연구자협의회 상임위장인 서울여대 김진석입니다. 반갑습니다. 오늘 이 행사의 여는 말씀을 전태일 범국민 행사위원회의 이수호 상임대표님께서 해주시기로 되어 있었는데요. 금일 사정상 참석하지 못하신 관계로 진행자인 제가 개회 인사로 가름하고 바로 기조 발표로 넘어가도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 오후 세션에 대해서 간단하게 소개를 드리고 기조 발표자를 소개해 드릴 텐데요. 오늘 오후 세션은 기조 발표 후에 아시아 한국 투자자들의 민낯을 돌아본다라는 제목의 일부와 노동시장 밑바닥에 있는 이주 노동자들이라는 제목의 2부로 구성되며 일부는 이정희 한국노동연구원 연구위원께서 진행해 주시겠습니다. 그럼 오늘 기조 발표를 맡은 기조 발표의 내용과 기조 발표 강연자에 대한 소개를 드리겠습니다. 오늘 전태일 50주기 국제포럼의 마지막 세션은 앞서 말씀드린 바와 같이 글로벌 공급사슬 밑바닥에서 일하는 사람들이라는 제목으로 글로벌 공급사슬의 거의 최종 종착지라고 할 수 있는 동남아시아 지역의 노동 현장의 활동가들이 모여서 논의하는 자리를 만들었습니다. 그럼 이 자리에 기조 발표자를 소개하도록 하겠습니다. 에드워드 웹스터 교수님은 비트 바텔란트 대학교의 명예교수이자 같은 대학교의 불평등연구소 소장으로 활동하고 계십니다. 웹스터 교수님은 일의 세계, 노동운동과 사회정책에 관심을 두고 연구와 활동을 지속해 하시고 계십니다. 오늘은 인간적이고 문명화된 글로벌 공급 사슬은 가능한가라는 제목으로 강연해 주시겠습니다. 웹스터 교수님의 강연도 코로나 상황을 맞아서 사전 녹화된 영상으로 만나보시겠습니다. Please welcome Webster, Professor Webster. Thank you.
It's a great honor to speak to you today at a conference commemorating the life of Chun Tai-il. His fight and ultimate sacrifice for better working conditions and a more humane livelihood for young women workers is an inspiration to working people worldwide. I was troubled to read of the growth of protest suicides in Korea over the last decade, especially the case of the 30 protest suicides at Sangyong factory. Apparently, the growth of protest suicides is related to the increase in irregular and part-time work, where some workers feel they have few legal options for collective engagement in workplace actions. I speak to you from the other side of the globe, from the city of Johannesburg, on the southern tip of Africa. I speak from a country that has, after a century-long struggle, won its political democracy, but now faces the challenge of neoliberal globalization. Both Africa and Asia share a similar challenge, the challenge of competing in a deeply unequal world. Both countries have seen a change in the nature of the employment relationship, from full-time indefinite employment to various forms of precarious, fixed-term, part-time and outsourced employment. The question I want to address today is whether it's possible to make global supply chains humane and civilized. Put differently, is it possible to establish decent work in global supply chains? What do we mean by global supply chains? Put simply, global supply chains are networks that can span across multiple continents and countries for the purpose of sourcing and supplying goods and services. It is popularly assumed that the value created by these global supply chains trickles down to workers. But when they are upgraded economically and become more competitive, the wages and working conditions inevitably improve. In other words, economic upgrading leads to social upgrading. I will today challenge this view and argue instead that it's only through the struggle of workers, if you like, worker agency, that humane and civilized global supply chains can be created. I want to make my argument in three parts, in three propositions. My first proposition is that the liberalization of trade and the growth of global supply chains controlled by multinational corporations is eroding labor standards. It's creating what could be called a decent work deficit. We are living, I would argue, in the age of insecurity. Work has become precarious, uncertain, unpredictable, and risky, leading to increasing long-term unemployment, the growth of non-standard, casual, and informal employment, the increase in the risk shifting from employers to employees, and a decline in attachment to employers by the employee. There is, in other words, what I'm suggesting to you, a decent work deficit logic. By this, I mean that as the globe has liberalized trade and capital has moved across the globe, employers have bypassed what they see as rigid labor laws, what we call in South Africa labor brokers, intermediaries that in a sense provide labor, a third party in the employment relationship. And this is leading, I'm suggesting to you, to jobs being retrenched, workers being retrenched, and workers having to survive on poorly paid jobs, what I'm calling an informalization from below. At the same time as we see outsourcing, where decent work is eroded, what could be called informalization from above. So what I'm suggesting to you then is that this process of globalization is leading to an erosion of the traditional standard employment relationship. And more recently, we have seen the growth of so-called self-employment, where the multinational so-called tech giants, such as Uber, divest themselves from responsibilities towards their employees. They define them as independent contractors, and they manage this remote global supply chain through the app, through the iPhone. While globalization has changed the way in which work has been undertaken, in other words, we've had the digitalization, and it's taken globalization a step further. We are now able to do remote work across the globe from home with our own personal computers. That is why it's possible for Amazon, for example, to have its virtual customer service associates operating from Johannesburg. And from Johannesburg, they serve customers in the United States. So instead of putting these operators in a call center in a large building, a bit like a factory, they now work from home because of digital technology. So the big change I'm suggesting to you is the introduction of new digital technology plus globalization. However, if you look closely at these business practices amongst these global IT giants, such as Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, Google, Spotify, what it reveals is the emergence of a new business model. These multinational firms tend to evade corporate governance codes, laws and policies, such as antitrust and competition policy. Control and surveillance are exercised through a small, mathematically proficient elite, dominating decision-making and policy by owning and controlling the algorithm. In the process, even greater income and wealth inequalities are created, and increased precarity is witnessed. For example, last June this year, late June this year, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos added to his company $13 billion in net worth, demonstrating the increased value placed on the digital economy. So my first proposition is that as we've opened up the market globally, we've also seen the multinationals emerge as powerful players, eroding traditional standards of work. My second proposition is that a crucial feature of capitalist development is that it tends to be polarizing. It tends to deepen the divide. The roots of this argument go back to what came to be called dependency theory. The core idea of dependency theory is that the development of capitalism is uneven. It creates vast inequalities. And those vast inequalities are between the core countries, United States, Europe, Japan, the global north, if you like, and the periphery, the global south, the developing world, South America, Africa, and Asia. And this is illustrated in the diagram that I've displayed here, where you see the core, modern, globally connected, included in the capitalist economy, and the periphery, the underdeveloped, the disconnected from this new digital order, the excluded. This global unevenness leads to capital shifting its investments from areas of high wages in the north to those countries where the cost of the reproduction of labor power is lower. This leads to what we call a race to the bottom. A race to the bottom where capital, that is employers, move to those countries where the costs of labor are cheaper, and the trade unions are either deeply controlled or non-existent. The ability of some countries, such as Korea, to transition from the periphery to the core, to the center, does not invalidate dependency theory. The core idea behind dependency theory is that capitalism tends to generate uneven development between countries and within countries. And the key point is that Korean capital has been able to successfully industrialize, and in the process has developed, I would argue, a core peripheral relationship with its neighbors. Let me illustrate, and it's going to be illustrated by the lectures that are to follow my speech today. For example, the representative from the Vietnam General Confederation of Labor observes that South Korean capital is the largest FDI in Vietnam. Not only are the small, medium enterprises of textile and garment factories, but also Samsung and LG have offshored their main production lines to Vietnam, sent off their main production lines to an area of lower wage costs. But it seems that most Korean companies have failed to make industrial relations sound and sustainable, because most of the wildcat strikes protesting poor conditions and terms of work have been staged in these South Korean companies. And, as the representative from Indonesia writes, the South Korean companies are one of the biggest investors in the garment sector of Indonesia, hiring large numbers of female and young workers. These South Korean companies are the suppliers of the global brands such as Nike, Zara, Adidas, Mango, Walmart. But unfortunately, they are notorious for poor conditions and bad terms of work. So the unequal nature of the global supply chain is best illustrated when you break the cost down of a sports shoe produced in Indonesia. Let me illustrate that in an argument here. And here we see the price of a, let's say, for example, $100 sports shoe that's made in Indonesia. What the question really is, what goes to the worker? And it's quite extraordinary how little goes to the worker. 12% to the factory, profit 2%, production cost 2%, transport take 5%, brand name. And that's interesting, the brand name. In other words, when you think of Nike, just to illustrate my argument, you take Nike as a shoe and you think of the slogan, which I'm sure you're familiar with, let's do it, which is by the US baseball player that brands it. That a third of the cost of the shoe is not on the production side, but on the actual advertising and marketing of it, the brand name, and the profit, research, publicity, and the shocking thing is the wages. Of that $100 shoe, less than 1%, 0.4% goes, in other words, 4 cents, go to the wages of the workers. And these are workers living in these export and working in these export processing zones in Indonesia. So the impact of competition then, and that's really what I'm wanting to stress here, the impact of competition on the global supply chains in the apparel industry is illustrated in the table below. Here is an example of an analysis of the period from 1989 through to 2010, over a 2-decade period. You'll see that the lead firms paid increasingly lower prices to their suppliers, while also imposing short leading times. So you'll see here that the green part of the table there gradually goes down from 1989 around about 2000. You see that sharp drop as the pressure is to produce the apparel at a lower and lower price. But, and this is the interesting thing, and it's quite extraordinary, that you see at the same time as workers are being, as the price are paid per square meter in real US dollars, at the same time as the price of the apparel is declining. In other words, it's costing the person who's buying the apparel less money. At the same time, you see the decline in worker rights. That worker rights are violated to achieve the targets as this table illustrates. And you see then that blue line, just as the cost of the garments are starting to decline, and there's a squeeze here. Workers are being squeezed, working longer hours, paid less money in order to be able to reach their targets. So essentially, what I'm suggesting to you here is that firstly that by my first proposition, that by opening up the markets, we've created a competition. And led by the multinationals that eroded standard employment relations, and secondly, that has been done at the expense of this hyper competition of squeezing workers in order to be able to compete, and in this case export to the main buyer of the apparel, namely the United States. Now, my third proposition is that these exploitative conditions are generating resistance. Workers are beginning to openly resist these working conditions. I think you're finding it as this little pendulum swings towards greater squeezing of workers. Workers respond and they react to that, and the pendulum swings back, and you begin to have demands for regulating these supply chains. So my third proposition really is how we're beginning to see an attempt to try and regulate these supply chains. There are a range of initiatives that we've seen, essentially designed to establish core labour standards across the globe. In other words, to argue that there's a global labour market and therefore there should be basic core labour standards, no child labour, for example, freedom of association, those sorts of things. And there have been a number of attempts to try and regulate this. There was an attempt to establish a social clause to any trade agreement that laid down certain conditions. There are attempts at what we call corporate social responsibility, where companies have to commit themselves to investing in social upliftment in the communities in which they operate. And more recently, what we call global framework agreements, where international unions will enter into an agreement with a global corporation to agree on certain minimal standards. And in the wake of the collapse of the Rama Plaza building in Bangladesh, a deep tragedy where you had these garment factories and at least 1,132 people died and more than 2,500 were seriously injured in these garment factories. And rising out of that, an accord was reached between employers and workers designed to improve working conditions. So these are all attempts to try and put pressure on employers to agree to a basic level of minimum standards. Another response, I think this is a very important one, was to try and strengthen the capacity of the state, the government, the Department of Labour, to monitor labour standards through building the capacity of labour inspectors to make sure that the state, the government, actually monitors those labour standards. But I would argue that what is most significant is that workers are discovering their power. Workers are beginning to discover or rediscover their power. They're finding ways to make use of the power that these global supply chains afford them. And we've seen, for example, across the globe in the last decade, the increase of wildcat strikes, roadblocks, boycotts from South China to Southern California. So let me conclude. What I've suggested to you is the expansion of the global labour market presents us with a paradox. On the one hand, it has deepened the exploitation of labour on a global scale, while ironically, on the other hand, it has led to opportunities to transcend these constraints through the emergence of new sources of power and forms of organisation. I will give you 3 examples of new opportunity to transcend and build solidarity. The first is the technological revolution. The digitalization we've spoken about has brought about instruments that can be used to the advantage of workers. Email, the iPhone, Skype, Zoom, the satellite television gives opportunities of global networks and campaigns for workers. Secondly, global supply chains create new vulnerabilities for employers. By linking production globally through global value chains, companies have become vulnerable to new sources of power. A delay in the delivery of an engine part in Korea to an assembly line in Australia can force employers in both Australia and Korea to the bargaining table. This is not all that different from the challenge of Henry Ford faced in Detroit in the 1930s. New sources of power have emerged in the age of globalization and digitalization. And thirdly, there are new global workplace norms. Worldwide international labor standards, codes of conduct, international framework agreements I've mentioned. This is a new benchmark for labor. In other words, there's a new logic at work in the global economy, a logic that argues that international labor standards must be introduced to prevent a race to the bottom. So on the one hand, we've got this force driving a logic towards what we called the decent work deficit and eroding of labor standards. On the other hand, we have a counter movement, a response. The pendulum swings back to try and regulate those standards and make them more socially sensitive and more likely to be humane and civilized. So let me just finally mention 4 things that I think can be done to regulate the global labour standard and create decent work. The first is, I think that the trade agreements must not only have core labour standards. We need to go beyond those core labour standards. Those trade agreements must cover wages, hours of work, health and safety, and particularly migrant workers' rights. These deserve particular attention. Secondly, we need to think not just of adopting these standards, we need to think of ways in which we can have sanctions, ways of penalizing people who violate these standards, and an enforcement mechanism process that need to be quite quick and rapid in actually ensuring that they're not just rhetorically adopted but actually forced to implement them. And if there's violation of the standards, there are sanctions. And thirdly, I think we have to think of developing the state capacity to actually ensure that there are labour inspectors that are properly staffed and funded. And of course that means we need the political will in our governments. And then finally, and I think most importantly for the gathering here today, is an active democratic workers and union participation must be a part of any mechanism for worker rights and building safety. Thank you very much.
네, 에드워드 웹스터 교수님 발표를 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다, 교수님. 에드워드 교수님께서는 그 글로벌 공급 사슬의 어떤 확장이 얼마나 노동권과 노동 조건의 침해를 가져오는지에 대한 말씀을 해주시면서 그것을 규제해 나가기 위한 노력의 내용과 그리고 글로벌 공급망이 얼마나 인간적인 얼굴을 할 수 있도록 하기 위한 우리들의 노력들에 대해서 정리해 주셨습니다. Thank you very much, Professor Edward Webster, for your inspiring keynote speech. Now we move on to the session 1 under the title of Looking Back, a Bare Face of South Korean Investors in Asia. 이제 그러면 세션 1으로 넘어가겠습니다. 저는 세션 1 사회를 맡은 이정희라고 하고요. 지금 한국노동연구원에서 일을 하고 있습니다. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jung-hee Lee, Research Fellow at the Korea Labor Institute. I'm here for moderating of this session. 이 세션은 앞서 말씀드린 것처럼 아시아에 진출해 있는 한국 기업들의 민낯을 돌아보라라는 제목으로 조직이 되었습니다. 한국의 많은 투자 기업들이 생산 비용의 절감의 측면이든 시장의 확대의 측면이든 다양한 목적하에서 아시아 각국들의 진출을 하고 있는데요. 진출한 이후에 그 나라에서 사업을 영위하는 과정에서 가장 기본적인 노동권을 침해한다든지 임금과 노동 조건을 굉장히 열악하게 부여를 한다든지 혹은 산업안전 문제에 굉장히 취약한, 그래서 굉장히 한국 기업들이 악명이 높다라는 비판을 받고 있습니다. 오늘 세 개 나라의 사례를 준비를 했습니다. 베트남과 인도네시아 그리고 인도의 사례를 통해서 한국의 투자 기업들이 해당국에서 어떻게 사업을 영위하면서 어떤 문제들을 야기하고 있는지, 그리고 그런 문제들에 맞서서 각국의 노동자들이 어떻게 투쟁하고 있는지에 대해서 말씀을 듣도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 베트남 사례를 듣겠습니다. 베트남 사례에는 정수안휘 베트남 노총의 국제국에서 일하시는 선임 부장님이십니다. Now we will have a Vietnamese case. Jong Xuan Huy, Chief of Division at the International Department of the Vietnam General Confederation of Labor, will be presented through a recorded video. Now, Jong Xuan Huy, it's time for you presentation. Thank you.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, colleagues. My name is Hieu, and I'm working for the International Department of the Vietnam General Confederation of Labor, VGCL, the National Center of the Trade Unions of Vietnam. As all of you know, Vietnam had gone through decades of war. Only in the second half of 1980s that Vietnam has started a dynamic policy to open up its economy for national economic development. After more than 30 years of dynamic, Vietnam does have a successful story of economic development to tell. With the law on foreign investment in Vietnam being adopted in December 1987, a new source of investment has helped Vietnam step by step, developing its economy, creating jobs, reducing poverty. From 1988, when the laws entered into force, to 1990, there were $1.6 billion of foreign investment going into Vietnam. It was a modest number after more than 2 years, however, given the fact that Vietnam's gross domestic product (GDP) of 1989 only was at nearly $6.3 billion. The new blood to the economic drives are essential. Since 1990, Vietnam's GDP has grown sharply based on an average annual GDP growth rate of 7.5% up until the global economic crisis in 2008. Economic growth fell to 2%, 6.2% in 2008 and 5.3% in 2009, and since then recovered to a range between 6 and 7%. Surely this year, 2020, this COVID-19 pandemic, the growth rate would be much lower, expectedly 2%, but still would be higher than most of the other countries. In the meantime, the percentage of the population below the poverty line estimated at 58% in 1993 has reduced to under 12% in 2009. You can see the difference in the picture. In the beginning, 2009, the number was even down to 2%. At the beginning, the FDI played a role of a push to create a breakthrough, providing vital resource to the development, stimulating internal resources to exploit the country's potential and advantages, thus carrying the country out of the crisis. Over the last 30 years, FDI sector has been growing and becoming one of the most dynamic sectors of the economy. In addition, the state budget revenue from FDI sector recorded remarkable growth from $1.8 billion during 1994 to 2000 period to $8 billion in 2017, with 58.2% of the total registered capital for the processing and manufacturing industries. The FDI sector has significantly contributing to shifting the economic structure. During the period of 1988 to 2016, foreign investment to Vietnam originated from 78 countries and territories, and the biggest investing countries is Korea, with total registered capital of $50.5 billion. Japan ranks second, while Singapore and Taiwan are next on the list. Since 2010, Korea kept a position as the biggest investor in Vietnam. Up to this year, the total registered capital from Korea reached $70 billion. Amongst the Korean investors, there are many large corporations, namely POSCO, Kyungnam, Cham, Samsung, LG, Doosan, Kumho, Lotte, GS, Hyosung, Hyundai, SK, etc. Interestingly, in 2015 and 2016, the total FDI of Korea to 120 countries and territories were both at $28 billion each year. Korean FDI to Vietnam in 2015 and 2016 were $7 billion and $8 billion respectively, accounted for a quarter of the total Korean FDI all over the world. However, with the total registered investing projects of about 8,000 so far, the average size of a Korean invested projects was nearly $9 million. Given that the average size of all FDI projects in Vietnam was $30 million, about 40% higher than the average of Korean projects. Despite a number of investment from Korean chaebols, one can assume that most of the Korean investors to Vietnam were in fact small and medium. The manufacturing sector accounted for 82% of the investment, led by large-scale investment from Samsung and LG Electronics. Electric and electronic manufacturing accounted for the largest portion of the manufacturing and processing sector at 65%, followed by textile and fabric manufacturing at 22%. There were nearly 7,000 Korean invested companies in Vietnam, which employed more than 700,000 workers and accounted for 30% of the Vietnam total export value, according to Ministry of Planning and Investment. It can be said that Korean invested companies are an important part of the Vietnamese economy. With the fast-growing number of the enterprise of all sectors in Vietnam, especially FDI sector, coupled with growing numbers of workers employed in the private sector, only in the FDI sector, 6.1 million out of the total in 2019. The industry relations have become much more complicated than in the early 1990s. In Vietnam, between 2006 and 2010, the average nominal wage increased 26.8% per year, and even real wages increased by 12.6% on a yearly basis, according to ILO Office Hanoi. However, according to the ILO Global Wage Report 2014-2016, the average monthly wage in Vietnam was $119 in 2013. This number was equivalent to about one-third of the average monthly wage in Malaysia and China, and about half of the average monthly wage in Thailand the same year. Therefore, wages in Vietnam remained one of the lowest in the region. Wages in labor-intensive industries were the lowest among the others informal sectors, normally close to minimum wages. This is the main reason for the wave of strikes and work stoppage since 2000. It is worthy to note that the peak of the strikes wave in 2008 and 2011 coincided with the global financial crisis started from the US in 2008 and the debt and deficit crisis in Europe in 2011. Since 2012, there was a tendency of reduction in terms of the total numbers of strikes in Vietnam. Along all these years, about 3/4 of the total strikes occurred in FDI enterprise. The rest were in domestic private enterprises and in very few state-owned enterprises. I will go into detail of the strike occurred from 2017 to 2019. In this chart, you can find that in all 3 recent years, the number of strikes have been reduced from year to year, and the majority of the strikes occurred in FDI sector, ranging from 87% to 71% to 85%, depending on the year. And there was no strike on state-owned enterprise. Out of the strike occurred in FDI sector from 2017 to 2019, with strikes in Korean companies represented by the blue, you can find that the number of strikes in Korean companies accounted for 30 to 40% of the total strikes in FDI sector. Among others, one reason for this figure was the significant proportion of Korean companies in the total FDI companies. Concerning the industry of the strike, textile and garment is the biggest group of companies with strikes. Shoe leather companies accounted for nearly 90%. Good process and electronics came next with 6.63% and 6.78%. The clear characteristic for this strike is that it occurred majorly in the labor-intensive industries where wages are relatively low, high overtime working hours, and various forms of breaches of laws by employers. Concerning right-based collective dispute, the main causes for the strikes are the violation of the law by employers in various issues such as delaying payment of salary from weeks to months in different cases. Working hours was unilaterally set higher by employers without consultation. Along working hours, overtime work paid not following the regulations. Late or no transfer of the contribution of medical and social insurance, whereas deducting workers' contribution from their wages. Violation on the legal leave or rest period, etc. Concerning interest-based collective disputes, the conflicts may include different types of bonus, wage increase, shift meal quality and value. Different types of bonus wage increase different workers' allowance, low condition working environment, poor hygienic facilities, etc. There were also a number of disputes which led to strike due to the mounting attitude and disrespect of managers and supervisors to workers' dignity. Right-based disputes accounted for 42% strike from 2017 to 2019. Interest-based strike accounted for 19.58%. Combined rise and interest-based strike accounted for 35.39%, and strike based on other costs stood at 2.71%. This figure shows clearly that many strikes occurred due to non-compliance with law of employers, while many demands for better benefits of workers were not met by employers. The tendency of strikes in Korean companies was the same. The vast majority of the strike here occurred in labor-intensive industry, namely textile and garment, shoe leather, leather bags, wood and plastic processing, electronics, etc. As I mentioned earlier, most of the Korean companies, aside from the giant corporations, were in fact small and medium. Strikes occurred mostly in those small and medium-sized Korean companies, more than half of which was in textile and garment, shoe leather, and leather bag sector. But in many cases, the cause of strikes in Korean companies were the same with invested companies from other countries. We also found a number of cases that Korean managers were harsh and rude badly treated the workers, which led to their resistance. It could be brutal or rude behavior of the manager or supervisors in some cases, which was easy to identify, but it can also be more sophisticated action of the managers in the other case. In Dongnam province, for example, Korean managers use videos and photos of workers without working in the production line against them to lower their performance and payment. The case turns out that there was no order for the company at that time. There were cases not only in Korean companies that the managers intendedly had paid their due of social and medical and unemployment insurance with the amount of million US dollars, and workers were victimized as not benefiting from the insurance, and the managers has escaped for the country after one night. For VGCL, as the organization defending the legal and legitimate rights and interests of Vietnamese workers, we found a number of problems that needed to be addressed to improve the status of industrial relations and to meet the legitimate demands of workers. Firstly, for national policy, since 2019 and 12, the Labour Code enabled us to form a tripartite national working council, which VGCL representatives were part of. Annually, VGCL Research Unit carried out our own research and survey to figure out the minimum living standards to back our demand for a minimum wage increase, which in practice had an important impact to millions of workers in labor-intensive industries. We also took part in the lawmaking process to make sure that labor dispute settlement procedures were regulated in a feasible and simple enough to follow. Secondly, we also utilized resources from training, capacity building, and build up a network of legal aid officers to provide consultation for our workplace, trade unions, and members to avoid unnecessary conflicts due to lack of information. Thirdly, we promoted dialogue with the employers to get their viewpoints and problems. We have dialogue with some foreign investors association with the support of their respective embassies. We dialogue with the Association of Foreign Investors like Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese investors at the province level or industrial park level. We also support our grassroots level unions to dialogue regularly with the employers to exchange and understand each other. Many conflicts arose due to lack of social dialogue. Some efforts were not as successful as we expected, but we believe that we need to keep trying more. Fourthly, we also mobilized significant resources for training our grassroots union officials with communication and negotiation skills and knowledge. That is to better understanding our workers and members' demand. We also develop core group of workers who volunteer to meet with our fellow workers to learn their problems, their needs, and later to translate those into good quality collective bargaining agreement. Annually, we analyze and rate the existing CBAs, sharing the best practice so that our grassroots unions can learn from the lesson of others. Fifthly, through our grassroots unions, officials, and core groups of workers, we try to find out the violation of laws of the employers, and local federation of labor would work with the authorities concerned to conduct inspection to the companies at the early stage to prevent serious cases of violations, such as long overdue social and medical and unemployment insurance debt of the companies, wages policy, overtime work policy, working environment, workers' welfare and benefits, etc., could be inspected. We have proposed and succeeded to criminalize some forms of violation by employers if the impacts to workers were serious enough. Sixthly, we try to organize the unorganized company, including many Korean companies. We combined both bottom-up approach and top-down approach to put pressure on the employers to allow our workers to form the unions in their company. This has been a long struggle in many cases. Seventhly, we were working with the local governments to filter the investors who need to prove that they want to invest in long-term for sustainable profits. As we experienced, many employers intended to invest for short-term and then escaped from the country with huge unpaid dues. There were other measures that unions as well as government in Vietnam has done together to improve the industrial relations that I may not touch due to the limited time bound. Though last but not least, as unions, we believe that we can learn from the experience of our brothers and sisters from other countries. And with that, I would like to thank our organizers for providing us such a platform for us to share and learn from each other. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 지금까지 베트남 노총 국제국에서 활동하시는 정 수안히우 동지로부터 말씀을 들었습니다. 베트남 경제가 어떻게 글로벌 공급망에 통합되는지 그 역사적 맥락에서부터 특히 한국 기업들에서 발생하는 여러 노사관계 관련된 이슈들 그리고 그것에 대처하기 위한 베트남 노총의 최근의 활동까지 방대한 양을 커버를 해주셨습니다. Thank you very much for your presentation, Jong Sun-hyo. Now it's time to move on to the second presentation. 두 번째로 준비한 프레젠테이션은 인도네시아 사례입니다. 작년 그 한국 언론에서도 보도가 된 바 있는 SKB 봉제 공장에서 발생한 임금 강탈 사건이라고 해야겠죠. 임금을 지급하지 않고 사회보험료도 지급하지 않다가 사장이 도망갔던 사례인데요. 이 사건이 어떻게 해결되고 있는지 그 과정에서 어떤 노력들이 있었는지 그리고 여전히 풀리지 않은 문제는 무엇인지에 대해서 샤리프 아리핀 동지께서 발표를 해주시겠습니다. 이분은 지금 인도네시아 노동자원센터 연구원으로 활동하고 계십니다. Now we will move on to the second presentation, the case of the SKB factory in Indonesia. The presenter is Sharif Arifin, a researcher, Labor Resource Center. He will present via a recorded video. Sharif Arifin, it's your time for your presentation. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Sharif Arifin. I am from Indonesia. I work for Sedani Labor Resource Center. We will discuss about the situation Indonesian workers in Korean garment factories. Okay, let's start. These are migrant workers emboss factory in Tangerang, Banten. Mikwang received an emboss order for Adidas brand shoes. The workers are about 600 people, 90% of contract workers. They are occupying the factory because the owner ran away. And these are workers in Dada Indonesia workers in Purwakarta, West Java, a supplier of clothing for various brands, including Adidas and H&M. Also, these are workers of Selaras Kausa Busana, or SKB, in Bekasi, West Java, clothing supply factories such as SKB, Mikwang, and Dada Indonesia is a company from Korea, which has been in operation since the 1990s and ran away from Indonesia without paying wages and pay compensation to the workers. Not just the three companies that ran away from Indonesia. In this data, we can see another problem, namely, the other companies moved their production to the other cities with lower wages. Meanwhile, workers in the various places were fired with unfair compensation. Here we can see Dream Sentosa and Kaho Indah. General characteristics of garment factories in Indonesia have similar behavior. At least, I note 7 common problems in garment factories. Without recognizing national borders, garments from India, from Germany, from Taiwan had the same level of violation as follows. Most of the workers in garment industry receive only the minimum wage. Also, the garment workers are women who experience verbal and non-verbal violations, forced time, short-term contracts, contractual workers, application of system of corporal punishment, inhuman work environment, retaliation against trade union and worker protests, and so on. These are a picture of toilets and canteens in garment factory. The available toilets and canteens are very full and difficult to workers to access. Management reduces work facilities to increase production and increase profits. Reducing work facilities by limiting the number of toilets used, reducing the number of toilets, leaving toilets dirty. The canteen is dirty with subpar food quality and taste. Besides, drinking water is also not provided. This is the general problem in all of the garment industry. So, what are the special characteristics of Korean business and management? If the owners of capital from other countries are skilled in controlling and conquering the labor unions, Korean factories are willing to face with the labor unions, as experienced by the management of the Dosan Cipta Busana Jaya, who was sued for 2 billion rupiah after trade union strike in 2013. And in Dream Sentosa Factory Karawang lawsuit against workers who refused to accept the resignation scheme in early 2018. Also, the involvement of the South Korea Employer Association, the Korean Garment Manufacturer Association in Indonesia, or KOGA, pressured the government not to raise the minimum wage. This can be traced to cases of postponement of labor-intensive minimum wages in labor-intensive wages, in fact, are not recognized in the law and regulations. As we all know, Korean business in Indonesia has been going on for a long time. In fact, young people in Indonesia really like Korean music groups and film dramas. Labor-intensive manufacturing investments from Korea began in the late 1980s. Until now, investment from Korea has always been in the top 5 position in the investment ranks. The other position is United States, China, Japan, also Australia, Taiwan, but South Korea always have good investment in Indonesia. Trade union in Indonesia and Korea should build networks to strengthen each other. Need decisive action from both countries to punish employers who break the rules. That's all my presentation. Thank you.
네, 발표 감사합니다. 지금 인도네시아에서 비단 SKB 공장뿐이 아니라 다수의 인도네시아 진출한 기업들에서 발생하고 있는 노동 탄압 사례들에 대한 말씀드렸고, 흥미로운 얘기는 한국 기업들이 어떤 노사관계 문제에 직면을 했을 때 어떤 대화나 협상을 통해서 풀기보다는 손해배상이나
menyeberangi jalan tol untuk segera tiba di pabrik. Mereka adalah buruh Pojeng, perusahaan Taiwan pemasok sepatu olahraga Nike yang mendirikan pabrik di kota kecil Serang. Di kota industri seperti ini, yang kita temukan adalah perempuan-perempuan muda yang datang dari kota-kota kecil dan provinsi sekitar. Mereka bekerja dengan upah yang hanya sedikit lebih tinggi dari ketentuan upah minimum. Itu pun sekitar seperempatnya harus dibelanjakan untuk membayar kamar sewa sempit. Sisanya untuk makan dan belanja sehari-hari. Dan mengirimkan sedikit uang untuk keluarga mereka di kampung asal. Kota-kota industri, terutama yang memproduksi garmen, tekstil, dan alas kaki, seakan hanya dihuni orang berusia muda. Karena pabrik hanya menghendaki mereka yang berusia muda. Beberapa ratus kilometer dari Serang, di kawasan berikat Nusantara Cakung, pun akan kita temukan pemandangan serupa. Ribuan perempuan muda datang dan pergi pada setiap jam pergantian gilir kerja. Mereka yang sudah tak lagi muda atau gagal mencari kerja di pabrik, berusaha mencari nafkah sebagai pedagang kecil. Sebagian lagi mencoba mencari peruntungan untuk bekerja di luar negeri sebagai buruh perkebunan atau buruh konstruksi di Malaysia, atau menjadi pembantu rumah tangga di Saudi Arabia. Buruh-buruh di KBN Cakung umumnya dibayar murah. Itu sebabnya mereka sering dilanda kesulitan keuangan, lalu menjadi mangsa lintah darat. Jam kerja mereka panjang, maka tak mengherankan bila sepulang kerja mereka merasa perlu melepas lelah di warung penjual jamu untuk mengusir lesu, lelah, pegal, dan nyeri otot.
Jamunya enak.
Oh, sabunnya enak.
Oh, tenang. Tenang, woy.
Sudah banyak yang tahu bahwa perusahaan-perusahaan yang beroperasi di KBN Cakung sering melakukan pelanggaran hak dasar perburuhan. Di sebuah perusahaan pemasok H&M, berlaku ketentuan bahwa perusahaan dapat memecat Anda jika Anda kedapatan hamil. Sebagian besar buruh yang bekerja di sini adalah buruh-buruh yang dikontrak untuk masa kerja pendek. Banyak perusahaan secara ilegal memberhentikan buruh tetap. Anda bisa bekerja kembali asalkan bersedia menjadi buruh kontrak. Dan anehnya, proses peralihan status ini mereka beri nama pemutihan.
Aku udah takut kehilangan teman, masa?
Untuk tumbuh sebagai negara industri berorientasi ekspor, agar dapat bersaing dengan negara Asia lain di hadapan investor, pemerintah Indonesia tanpa malu-malu menjajakan orang-orang muda ini sebagai buruh murah, sebagai keunggulan komparatif, sambil membiarkan kasus pemberangusan serikat merajalela, dan terus menasihati buruh untuk rajin bekerja dan menjunjung tinggi hubungan industri yang harmonis.
PT Selaras Kausa Busana is garment factory located in Bojong Menteng, Bekasi. The factory opened in year 1990. They are working for the brands such as Kmart, Sonoma, Target, Disney, Kohl's, and Justice, with the exporting target to countries such as US, Turkey, Uni Emirat Arab, Europe, Korea, Vietnam, and India. Since year 2013-2018, the workers of Selaras Kausa Busana has received salary under the Bekasi minimum wage, as the result of wage postponement requested by company to Indonesian government. On October 2018, Kim Jae-chul, South Korean-owned factory, disappeared from their factory without any further notice, leaving the workers and their families on uncertain condition. The factory, which started operation in 1990, has very poor working condition. This picture shows us the stairs to praying room. It's located at the back side of the factory. Usually workers only have 30 minutes on their lunch break, including praying time. This is what canteen look like, but without food provided by the company. Usually workers have to buy their food outside the factory and eat at this place. This is the condition of the locker and the production line as well. And this is the condition of the dirty toilet. Number of toilets in the factory is 90 toilets, but most of them are broken and dirty. This is the picture of dormitory building for Korean supervisor. They are inside the factory. On 14th of March 2019, hundreds of workers of Selaras Kausa Busana held a demonstration in front of the Ministry of Manpower and Embassy of South Korea in Jakarta. The workers demand immediate payment of their unpaid wage and the social security as well. The workers also call immediate action from Indonesian and Korean government and brands to solve their problems. On April 2019, in several meetings, the Ministry of Manpower, together with KOGA, Korean Garment Association, and company representatives, offered the escaped workers of wage payment with the total money transferred around 650 million Korean won. The company said the payment was sent by Kim Jae-chul as the compensation money. On 6 May 2019, the Selaras Kausa Busana declared as the bankrupt company and now on the stage of selling the company assets. In total, company debts to creditors includes workers' severance payment around 123.36 billion rupiah. The relation of Kocham and Koga in the SKB case. During many meetings organized by Ministry of Manpower, representative of Kocham joined the meeting and promised to help, but so far no further development of the case. Korean Garment Manufacturer Indonesia, or KOGA, is the Association of the Korean Garment Companies. KOGA represents 200 Korean garment companies, and its number estimated as almost 60% from the total Korean garment companies operating in Indonesia. The KOGA actively working as the representative of Korean companies, especially on the issue of minimum wage and wage postponement. At least, started from year 2013, KOGA collectively active to demand wage postponement to the local government and administrative court, especially in Greater Jakarta and West Java. Until now, 323 workers are still struggling and fight for their wage and severance payment. The workers demand both Indonesian and Korean government take their responsibility and take urgent steps to solve this case. Through this opportunity, the workers also want to call the attention of the international brands that produced by SKB workers to extend their responsibility for the workers.
네, 감사합니다. 인도네시아 발표 잘 들었습니다. 사건 발생이 2018년인 것을 감안하면 벌써 만 2년이 다 되어가는 시점인데도 아직 완전한 해결이 이루어지지 않았다는 점에서 지금 발표자께서 강조하신 그 국제 연대를 통해서 이 문제들을 더 해결하기 위한 노력을 경주해야 될 것 같습니다. 다시 한번 발표해 주신 샤리프 아리핀 동지께 감사 인사드립니다. Thank you, Sharif Arifin, for your inspiring presentation. 그러면 이제 세 번째 발표로 넘어가겠습니다. 이제 인도로 가겠는데요. 지난 5월 인도에서 큰 사고가 있었습니다. LG화학이 인도에 진출해서 비사카파트남이라는 곳에 공장을 지어서 영업을 하고 있는데 독가스가 누출이 돼서 지역 주민들이 사망하는 사건까지 발생을 하였습니다. 이전에 한국도 성면 문제로 많은 고통을 겪었는데 한국이 이제는 가해자의 위치에 놓인 상황입니다. 이 상황에 대해서 그 라구후람 위원장께서 라구후람 위원장님은 인도의 화학 제약 연합 노동조합의 위원장을 맡고 계시고요. 그리고 바스프 공장의 어떤 인도 망갈로르 공장 노조의 부위원장도 맡고 계십니다. Now we will have the presentation of India case. The presenter is Raghuram TC, the president of Indian Chemical, Pharmaceutical and Allied Workers Union, and the vice president of BASF Mangalore Union. Raghuram, it's your time for presentation. Thank you.
Dear comrades and colleagues, I am Raghuram, president of Indian Chemicals, Pharmaceuticals and Allied Workers Union. Let me thank you for the inviting in Asian Labour Forum. I am working in one plant of BSF India. As you may aware that India is facing restructuring of expensive labour laws, regime of over 40 laws into 4 codes under the false argument that the law are archaic and need to be made more effective, flexible and in line with the emerging economic and industrial scenario. The changes have been constantly opposed by the Indian unions and held massive demonstration in January, July, August and September this year. The Council of Global Union has supported the action and calling for the withdrawal of anti-worker labor laws. India is facing safety crisis after the country has returned back to the work after the COVID-19 lockdown. India is facing huge safety crisis as industrial accident took place frequently and killing and maiming the workers, polluting the surrounding with the long-term health and environmental implication. Since May, totally 45 accidents in chemical plant, coal mines and steel mills have been reported. The series of accidents expose pattern of systematic failure of process safety management. The massive industrial accident that occurred at the LG Polymer Chemicals plant located at the outskirts of Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh, India. During the early morning of 7th May 2020, the plant was reopened following the national lockdown implemented due COVID-19 outbreak. Around 2,000 metric tons of styrene were stored in tank at the plant, which were left unattended. Styrene monomer must be stored between 20 to 22 degrees Celsius because higher temperature result in rapid vaporization. It is believed that the computer glitched the factory's cooling system allowed temperatures in the storage tank to exceed safe levels, causing the styrene to vaporize. Between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m., when maintenance activity was in progress, the gas leaked from the plant and spread to nearby villages. It is evident to say that the accident was the result of insufficient maintenance of unit storing styrene monomer, improper storage and operational errors, resulting vapor cloud spread over a radius of 3 kilometers, affecting the nearby areas and villages. The chemical plant was originally established in 1961 as Hindustan Polymer and acquired by LG Chemicals in 1997 and expanded its operation between 2006 to 2018. The plant manufactures polystyrene, copolymer products and engineering plastics compounds. Totally 150 supervisors, 50 permanent workers and 300 contract workers are working. Permanent workers and few contract workers are unionized. The central government as well as state government constituted several committees, including Joint Monitoring Committee consulted by National Green Tribunal, that is NGT, and a High Power Committee, it is HPC. According to the official report, this deadly gas leaked, killed 12 people and injured 585 who were severely affected. Several people were found unconscious, semi-conscious and suffering from other serious health issues, including nausea, breathing difficulties, skin rashes, sore eyes, and extras. Overall, 20,000 people from 17,000 homes in the affected villages were evacuated with arrangement made at 23 rehabilitation centers. The National Green Tribunal said that it is a clear-cut negligence and gross human failure on the part of the company, and according to the report filed on 28th May, several key lapses were found that lead to disaster. One, the tank was on old design and the chiller system was switched off at 6 p.m. on the previous evening as part of routine maintenance. Second, no temperature or pressure monitoring done at the middle or top of the tank where the space was left for vaporization, and only temperature monitoring gauge was at the bottom of the tank. Third, no interlock system arrangement between the temperature monitoring and refrigeration system. Fourth, no internal water spray arrangement over the tank in case of temperature increases. Water sprinkler system was not automated. Manual sprinklers could not be assessed as it was hazardous area. Fifth, unit could not assess personal protective equipment, safety preparedness not there to respond to leak. Sixth, siren alarm were not automatic, manual alarm system with control in the hazard area. No warning could be issued. Seventh, tetrabutyl catechol, it is TBC, which is an inhibitor chemical to slow down the reaction, was not topped up since April 1st, since there was no TBC stored at the site. In addition to this, the NGT report also mentioned that the safety protocols were not followed. The response of the officers and workers present at the factory to the gas leak was also slow, and a lack of handling experience by trained manpower, several lapses by the government and local administration in the tragedy. In addition to the failure of factory inspector to ensure that the basic safety protocols were put in the place at the factory. Furthermore, the High Power Committee submitted their detailed report 6th July 2020 of 4,000 pages, which revealed several safety lapses and gross negligence in handling of the gas leak, and including immediate action taken by government agencies and Department of Committee's suggestions and recommendations. The committee listed around 21 major reasons for the accident. It's including 1. Improper storage design. 2. Insufficient maintenance of old storage tank and disgrade of for red flags. Third, the temperature inside the oldest of the 3 storage tanks holding styrene monomer, a chemical used in making polystyrene products, rose to more than 6 times the permitted level due to polymerization, a chemical reaction that generates heat. Fourth, the company management had ignored the rise in polymer content from 4th April 2020 and then the sharp rise subsequently on 25th April 2020 and 28th April 2020. Fifth, the management considers polymer content as a quality measure for styrene rather than the safety measures. Additionally, aspects such as the local flora and fauna, natural environment like water bodies, air shield, soil, farms, vegetation, and livestock were also highly affected and found to have short and long-term impacts. The short-term impacts were: 1. The state's animal husbandry department reported the death of 34 animals. Second, a plant dried up wherever the relatively heavy mixture of monomer and polymer styrene was flooded. The team noted all the trees were dried up to the level of styrene vapor, engulfing the affected area. Third, the state horticulture department reported damage to half the crop with the 5-kilometer radius from the site of the accident. Fourth, for crop that were not affected, the horticulture department advised farmers to destroy them instead of selling them as produce, as they were not safe for consumption. Fifth, the drinking water supply was also disrupted because of the high possibility of contamination. And the long-term impacts are: 1. The report also mentioned aspects that may be considered long-term impact from the gas leak. This includes the effect of future health, livestock, and elements of the biota like air, water, soil, plant life, and wildlife. Second, the report also pointed that in most cases the impact are not a very serious concern. However, it must be ensured that all such aspects should be continuously monitored by an anonymity and abnormalities in the future because the accident was rare. Third, long-term effect of styrene vapor must be done by constituting appropriate institutional monitoring mechanism for at least 2 years. According to the report, this must be carried out with a particular focus on the health of pregnant women, the newborn, the residents of affected villages, and the feeders, feed, stock and milk of cattle, etc. Fourth, the report also called for individual government departments, including medical and health, veterinary, horticulture, forest and environment, to be made responsible for the studies. The case was registered against the management on LG Polymers, including Section 278. It is making atmosphere noxious to health. 284, negligent conducted with respect to poisonous substance. 285, negligent conduct with respect to fire or combustible matter. 337, causing hurt by act endangering life or personal safety of others. 338, causing grievous hurt by act endangering life or personal safety of other of 3042 of the Indian Penal Code. On 7th July, exactly after 2 months of the accident, LG Polymer Managing Director and CEO, Technical Director and Operational Additional Director were arrested till 22nd July. 9 other staffs of the company were also arrested. The Pollution Control Board also suspended 3 of its officials for gross negligence. The Director of Factories suspended, Deputy Chief Inspector of Factories over his lapses and failure in enforcement of Factory Act and other rules in LG Polymer. The case of the logistic of compensation and prosecution of the South Korea-based LG Polymer is still pending in the court. Many human rights organizations have demanded criminal prosecution of the factory management as well as the official of the regulatory bodies. The Andhra Pradesh government had announced that rupees 10 million, that is approximately 0.13 million US dollar compensation will be paid to the families of those who have died. Victims undergoing treatment on ventilators will get rupees 1 million, that is approximately 13,620 US dollar each. Others who are hospitalized will receive rupees 0.1 million, that is approximately 1,362 US dollar each. The state government will also provide compensation to those who had to visit the hospital, the families who had to evacuate, and those who lost cattle to the gas. These payments, however, are ex gratia payment by the state government and entirely separate from LG Polymer liabilities. The court said that they will not be able to claim any reduction in the compensation owed because of what the government is paying the victims. The Republic of Korea has a long-standing economic partnership and investing in many industrial sectors, including energy, electronics, automobiles, prime movers, road transport, infrastructure development, hospitals and diagnostic centers, and shipbuilding. More importantly, many South Koreans have strong presence in India, including Hyundai, POSCO, Samsung, KIA Motors, and LG Electronics. The Republic of Korea is the 13th largest FDI investors in India, investing $4.5 billion during April 2020 to June 2020. The Republic of Korea and India signed many trade agreements, including CEPA, Free Trade Agreement in 2009, and the Indian Chamber of Commerce in Korea was also established to support Korean companies interested in doing business in India. The South Korea companies are anti-union companies and follows no union policy. POSCO plant in Maharashtra are struggling for recognizing of trade unions since long. However, the Hyundai construction equipment plant in Pune is unionized and sound industrial relation. COVID-19 has brought a lot of changes for workers and unions, including government attacks on workers' rights, suspending the trade union registration, extending the workers' hours, and increase in precarious employment conditions. Further worsen the safety and health condition. The world is changing now, and many countries, including India, showed policy paralysis. The policies are uneven and unfair, and trade unions need to respond well. Trade unions need international solidarity and compassion, participation as stakeholder in formulation of trade and industrial policy, mobilize their activities including women and youth and resource to defend working class.
네, 감사합니다. 지금까지 인도에서 발생한 가스 누출 사건의 경과와 지금까지 현황에 대한 말씀을 잘 들었습니다. Thank you, Ragharam, for your fascinating presentation. 그러면 지금까지 저희가 준비한 세 개의 프레젠테이션은 다 들으셨고요. 잠시 Q&A 세션으로 들어가고자 합니다. 지금까지 발표되었던 세 가지 사례는 특히 그 한국이 아시아에서 그 많이 진출한 그 기업들의 사례가 특히 노동권의 탄압이라든지 임금과 노동 조건의 열악함, 그리고 방금 인도 사례에서 보신 것처럼 기본적인 산업 안전에 대한 기준도 준수하지 않고 있는 그런 열악한 사례들에 대한 말씀을 들으셨습니다. 그래서 저희가 그 현장 상황을 고려해서 미리 세 분의 발표자들께 질문을 드렸고요. 그 질문에 대해서 각각 답변하는 방식으로 Q&A 세션을 진행하고자 합니다. So far, we have all the presentation from Vietnam, Indonesia, and India. So now we move on to the Q&A session. Actually, I believe all of you received my questionnaires before. So now we will have the Q&A session. 그러면 먼저 제가 각 프레젠테이션을 하신 분들께 드린 질문을 간단하게 요약을 하고요. 베트남, 인도네시아, 인도 차례로 답변을 좀 듣도록 하겠습니다. 그 베트남은 앞서 말씀처럼 가장 한국이 기업이 FDI 중에 가장 큰 포션을 차지하는 그런 국가인데 지금과 같은 글로벌 공급망의 그런 확장과 더불어서 초국경적인, 그러니까 크로스 보더 수준에서의 사회적 대화나 초국적 기업을 상대로 한 단체 협약의 체결 필요성도 많이 제기가 됩니다. 그래서 베트남 사례에서는 베트남 노총 MGCL이 주도해서 진행되었던 베트남 진출 한국 기업을 포함한 초국적 기업들을 상대로 한 사회적 대화나 단체 협약 체결을 통해서 새로운 어떤 그 노동의 거버넌스 구축을 위한 노력을 기울이신 걸로 알고 있는데 그 노력에 대해서 조금 더 언급해 주셨으면 좋겠고, 이 과정에서 한국의 조직된 노동자들과의 연대도 굉장히 필수적이다라고 생각을 합니다. 관련한 고민을 듣고 싶습니다. 인도네시아 사례에서는 아까 영상에서도 보신 것처럼 저임금과 열악한 노동 조건에 저항하는 노동자들의 투쟁의 사례들을 보았는데 여찬 이 노동 조건에서 열악함, 고용에서의 어떤 불안정성은 제 입장에서 봤을 때는 단체 교섭을 얼마나 파워풀하게 하느냐 하고도 관련이 있는 것 같습니다. 그런데 한국을 포함해서 아시아 각국의 노사관계는 주로 기업 단위에서 분권화되어 있고 파편화되어 있다라는 지적을 많이 받고 있는데요. 이러한 분권화되고 기업 단위 중심의 단체 교섭이 어떤 투자 기업들의 비인격적인, 비인간적인 그런 행위를 바로잡는 데에는 충분치 않다라고 봅니다. 그러한 점에서 인도네시아 내에서 노동조합의 조직 현황 그리고 단체 교섭 관행에 대해서 조금 더 부연 설명을 해주시기를 바랍니다. 세 번째는 인도 사례인데요. 한국 역시도 일전에 독일과 일본의 기업들이 기준을 지키지 않고 성면을 다루어서 문제가 되었습니다. 선진국들이 각 그 공예 기업들을 자국의 어떤 그 노동과 환경 안전 규제를 피하기 위해서 그리고 싼 비용으로 노동력을 얻기 위해서 다른 나라, 특히 개발도상국으로 그런 위험 공정들을 아웃소싱을 하고 있습니다. 이거는 공해 수출의 다름 아니라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 반복되는 산업재해 그리고 주민의 피해는 살인과도 다름없다라고 생각하고 있습니다. 저는 이런 문제들을 해결하는 다양한 방안들 중에서 공장 노동자들을 포함해서 그 영향을 받고 있는 지역 공동체의 주민들이 그 문제 해결 과정에 조금 더 펀더멘털한 안전 규제를 마련하고 그것이 제대로 집행되도록 모니터링하고 감독하는 그런 역할들의 노동자와 지역 주민의 참여가 필수적이라고 생각을 하는데요. 이번에 LG 화학의 이 사건을 계기로 해서 이러한 참여 문제에 대한 고민은 좀 어떠신지 인도 발표자분께 답변을 요청드리고 싶습니다. Okay, I believe all of you have my questionnaires in English before. So now, my first question goes to the Vietnam. So, Dong Xuan Hiu, could you kindly ask to my question? Thank you. 한국에서 지금 이 줌으로 보고 계신 분들께서는 줌 채팅방에서 한글로 정수환휘의 답변이 한글로 제공이 될 예정입니다. 참조해 주시면 되겠습니다. Please. 지금 우리가 글로벌 서플라이 체인으로는 굉장히 그 촘촘하게 연결이 되어 있는데 오늘 포럼 진행하는 과정에서 이제까지 그 연결망이 잘 작동이 되었는데 지금 현장과 직접 생방으로 연결하는 과정에서 네, 약간의 좀 시간이 필요한 것 같습니다. 네, 지금 우리가 베트남, 인도네시아, 인디아, 그리고 서울, 그리고 요하네스버그 다양한 대륙에서 지금 이 시간을 같이 하고 있는데요. 네. 지금 소리가 들리는 지역도 있고 그렇지 않은 지역도 있고 그런 것 같거든요. Song, can you hear me? I can't hear you. 네, 약간 테크니컬한 그런 문제가 있는 것 같은데요. 혹시 지금 이 상황을 보고 계시는 한국에서 이 지금 접속해서 포럼을 지켜보시는 분들이 계시면 제가 아까 드렸던 질문 이외에도 각 국 사례에 대해서 예를 들면 코멘트를 좀 주신다든지 아니면 추가적 질문이 있으시면 채팅방으로 연결해 주시면 좋겠습니다. 네. 그러면 지금 베트남 같은 경우는 약간 테크니컬한 문제 때문에 조금 시간을 두도록 하고요. 인도네시아 분께 먼저 말씀 듣도록 하겠습니다. Sharif Arifin, can you hear me? Sharif, can you hear me? No.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Could you kindly
Yeah.
answer to my question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I will answer. First, I want to underline, in the last 10 years, in the level of trade union density has continued to decline. In 2010, the number of people who worked, there were around 50 million people who joined the labor union, around 3 million people. But currently, the total workforce is around 46 million people. The number of people who associate no more than 2.5 million people. The meaning is that the organized labor force is getting weaker in Indonesia. The explanation for the decline in the number of members is related to the contractual workers, which make it difficult for workers to be involved in labor unions. Also, many workers has been fired in last 10 years. Also, the resistance of factory manager to the union is getting stronger for this year. I have also observed that it is easier for a factory manager to form a rival union or union for management or a yellow union. In garment factories, rival union or pro-management union are created to comply with the ethics standard for the brands, not to fulfill the standard international labor standard, but just for ethics standard brands. According to the official data, currently only 30% of companies have collective bargaining agreement of the total companies in Indonesia. I estimate that there are fewer CBS in garment factories. So, in my observations, of the 10 CBS in the food, beverage, automotive, and garment factories, I found that the quality of their respective of CBS was very poor, or just copy-paste from national laws. In fact, I found the contents of the CBS that list regulation that were worse than the national law. For example, in the national law on maternity leave, it is sufficient to inform management. But in CBS, it is required to obtain a letter from a doctor. The second sample, in the national law, the regulations regarding dismissal due to discipline have been removed from the regulation. But in the CBS, it is still written down. So it is my answer for your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I wonder, Zheng Xuanhui, now we will be connected. So I want to check, Zheng Xuanhui, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Wait for a sec. Okay. Could you answer to my question? Thank you, Jong Sung Hui.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Finally, yeah, technology is not my advantage. Yeah, thank you for your questions. I think the transnational company agreement with the MNCs, which you have proposed, is actually not new to new unions. Global union federations like industrial actually spend many efforts to negotiate and conclude a number of global framework agreements with the MNCs during the years. The point is, even many GFAs have been in place. The cooperation with national unions, company unions, the implementation of these GFAs are different from country to country, are different from company to company. Corporations themselves, as you know, they are united, but we the workers, so we need to be united as well. For such GFA, we need to be united from the consultation among ourselves to the process of negotiation and to the supervisions, the implementations of the agreements. To be honest, our unions in Vietnam, we have our effort to network and link the unions in the same supply chains. So far, it's still limited and still at the initial stage. We still have a lot of things to be done, which fortunately we also have the solidarity cooperation with the international unions like industrial in this cause. We had conducted pilot project to negotiate and conclude multi-employer agreement for a group of companies in the same sector. We had one with 6 or 7 LG suppliers in Haiphong Industrial Zone, same collective bargaining agreement. However, we need to expand it more. We need to have such national coordination of same supply chain unions in each country, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in India. before we can going, cross border. And yes, we appreciate the cooperation with the Korean unions, which we have been engaging in so far. And in the future, as I shared also during my presentation, the impact of Korean companies to our economy is huge. And while still many problems exist in these Korean companies, so in the future, we also expected more investment from Korea and come to Vietnam. So we do need the cooperation, solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Korea. And we are always ready for that. And thank you for your questions, and thank you for the opportunity to sharing with all of you.
네, 답변 감사합니다. 그러면 마지막으로 인도 사례 발표해 주신 라구하람 선생님께 답변 부탁드리겠습니다. Please, Mr. 라구하람.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Shall I continue?
Yes. Yes. Laguaram, go ahead, please.
Thank you for your comments, comrades. As I explained earlier, we are gravely concerned.
Excuse me, Laguaram, please. Could you turn off your radio, please? Could you turn off the radio? We have a strange sound from somewhere.
I didn't hear.
Could you volume down, please? Your speaker? Volume
Hello?
down. Could you turn down your volume of the speaker?
Hello? Can you hear now?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Cool.
Can I continue?
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you for your comments, comrade. As I explained earlier, we are gravely concerned on these accidents, which can be avoided. Around 3 to 4 more accidents took place in the chemical and pharma companies since last 2 months. It is nothing but the industrial homicide, and the government of India should also immediately react and impose strong safety measures and protocol to prevent such accidents. The government of India should immediately form an expert commission to analyze the industrial accidents, immediately address the safety crisis and stop potential accidents. The government should engage and establish meaningful dialogue with the union. Listen to their demands and implement and monitor safety measures in a collective way, both at the national level and at the factory level, to avoid accident in the future. However, as you might be aware that we means the workers are facing many challenges in terms of extreme right-wing government and not believing in the social dialogue. High precarious employment, low union density, and workers are divided based on many factors, including type of employment. Union is rivalizing. Caste and young workers are also alienated by the trade union. Lastly, thanks to Industrial Global Union, who we are affiliated to, has taken up this issue and working with us. Though though educating our member to refuse the unsafe work and publicize the accident report internationally, as well as lobbying with the national media and providing technical support to improve safety system. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for Laguaran for your final remarks. 네, 이상으로 지금 그 3개국의 사례 발표와 Q&A 세션을 모두 마치겠습니다. 지금 예정된 시간에서 약간 조금 초과되긴 했는데요. 오늘 발표와 토론 같이 해주신 베트남, 인도네시아, 그리고 인도에서 맡아주신 발표자 여러분께 감사드리고요. 그러면 저희는 잠시 한 10분 정도 쉬었다가 4시 30분에 두 번째 세션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 그러면 오늘 3일차 프로그램 전태일 50주기 국제포럼 3일차 프로그램의 가장 마지막 세션입니다. 오후 세션의 두 번째로 되어 있는 노동시장 밑바닥에 있는 이주 노동자들이라는 제목의 세션을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 오후 세션에는 두 명의 발표자가 있는데요. 먼저 말레이시아의 이주 노동자들 상황에 대해 발표해 주실 브루노 페레이라는 말레이시아 전자산업종업원 노조 서부지역 사무처장입니다. 페레이라 씨는 말레이시아 노동력 30%를 이주 노동자가 차지한 이유라는 제목으로 발표해 주시겠습니다. 다음으로 한국 상황에 대한 발표인데요. 2009년에 설립된 이주 노동자 문화교실 지구인의 정류장 상임 활동가로 활동하고 계시는 김인찬 씨께서는 한국의 근로기준법이 내버린 이주 노동자들이라는 제목으로 발표해 주시겠습니다. Okay, we have two speakers in our second presentation. First, Bruno Pereira from Malaysia will talk about immigrant workers in Malaysia under the title of How do migrant workers occupy 30% of total workforce in Malaysia? Next, Korean case will be presented by Ichan Kim of Olsean Station, a cultural class organization for immigrant workers in Korea. Mr. Kim will give us a talk titled as Immigrant Workers Abandoned by the Labor Standard Act. 그럼 먼저 브루노 페레라 씨의 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 역시 사전 녹화된 영상을 들려드리도록 하겠습니다. Please welcome Mr. Pereira from Malaysia. Mr. Pereira, the podium is yours.
Good afternoon. In this presentation, we will take a look at the challenges faced by the Malaysian trade unions with estimated 30% migrant labor force. I am Bruno Pereira, General Secretary of the Electronic Industry Employees Union Western Region, Peninsular Malaysia. Malaysia is a Southeast Asian country occupying parts of the Malay Peninsula or Malaya, now known as Peninsular Malaysia, in the west, and the island of Borneo, consisting of the states of Sabah and Sarawak on the east, separated by the South China Sea. Malaysia is located on a strategic sea lane that exposes it to global trade and various cultures. Malaysia is a microcosm of Asia, epitomizing its multicultural, multi-religious, and multiracial diversity. The average flight from Kuala Lumpur to Seoul is 6 hours, 15 minutes. If we look at the vital statistics, Malaysia is 3.3 times larger than South Korea. Its population is 62% of South Korea. So Malaysia, with its density, it's 97 people per square kilometer, whereas South Korea is populated with 520 people per kilometer square. But the GDP per capita is smaller than South Korea. Malaysia with only about 11,414 USD, while South Korea is 31,762. Malaysia was basically an agricultural country in its endeavor to transform the country into an industrialized nation. In the late 19th century, most of the Peninsular Malaysia was under the British colonial rule. Large-scale plantations were established by the British for new crops, such as rubber, introduced from Brazil in 1876, palm oil in 1917, and cocoa 1950. After independence from the British in 1957, Malaya, together with neighbor Singapore and Sabah and Sarawak on the Borneo Island, formed Malaysia in 1963. In 1965, Singapore exited the Federation to become an independent nation. In the early 70s, the Malaysian government set up export processing zones, EPZs, or free trade zones, FTZs, in its endeavor to transform the country into an industrialized nation. In 1972, the government have played an important role in promoting the growth and development of labor-intensive export-oriented industrialization. It was especially attractive to foreign multinational companies as the government guaranteed tax-free status or pioneer status, excellent infrastructure, uninterrupted electricity, clean water supply, and telecommunication connectivity, uninterrupted work throughout the year, English-educated and skill-trained workforce, cheap labor, and union-free environment. At that time, there was no safety and health legislations in place. Cheap labor and union-free environment were the main issues that bothered the trade union movement at that time. So the trade unions challenge number one was in 1980s, the trade unions and civil society groups launched a campaign for a Safety and Health Act. After much campaign and lobbying, the Occupational Safety and Health Act was legislated in 1994. Today, there are 54 industrial zones throughout the country. Main industries, electronic and electrical, petrochemical, food, plastic, medical equipments, general assembly, services, logistics, warehousing, e-commerce, etc. Number of jobs, around 2.55 million people were employed in the manufacturing industry, of which around 575,000 people, or 23% of them, were employed in the electrical and the electronic industry in Malaysia in 2019. Main investors, USA, Japan, Germany, France, UK, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Australia, etc. Export and sales. In 2019, exports of manufacturing goods with a value of ringgit Malaysia 834.17 billion, amounting for a large share of total export at 84.6% compared to 83.4% in 2018. Electronic and electrical products held the biggest share of Malaysia's export composition in 2019 at 37.8% or ringgit Malaysia 372.67 billion. Employment situation, the pull and push factor, which is the supply and demand of labor. Malaysia has been experiencing close to full employment since 1990, with a low population growth estimated at 1.74% in 2008, coupled with the large number of Malaysians working in Singapore and diasporas elsewhere, resulting in labor shortage in Malaysia. The push factor. As of 2019, according to the United Nations Department of Economics and Social Affairs, the population of the Malaysian diaspora stands at 1,730,152, with 300,000 commuting daily to Singapore, which amounts to a total of 2 million or 13% of the labor force. Reason being economic reason, education opportunities, they study abroad, family reason, marriage to foreigners with a job in the foreign country, business opportunities, religious reasons, political disenchantment or political issues, health reasons, or evasion of legal liabilities such as crime, taxes, loans, etc. So Singapore has 952,261 Malaysians staying there, with 300 commuting daily. Whereas in Bangladesh, The diaspora dispersal of Malaysians, 206,244, whereas in Australia, followed by Australia, United Kingdom, United States, Brunei, Canada, and Hong Kong. So total, this alone makes a total of 1,592,051, or 13% of the working population living outside the country. The pull factor. In the early 90s, the Malaysian government announced that the country is facing acute labor shortage and the need to pull in migrant labor. The Malaysian Trade Union Congress strongly objected, insisting that the government should offer incentives for companies to automate their production process. The government placated the unions by ensuring that the migrant labor is for employment in the 3D sector. The migrant workers were pulled in phases as follows. In 1992, in the construction and plantation sectors only. Then in 2000, allowed in manufacturing and service sector. Finally, in 2002, extended to all sectors. In a short period of 10 years, the employment scenario in Malaysia changed forever. For companies hiring a migrant worker, increases the labor costs by about 30% per worker due to a cost incurred for air travel costs of the migrant worker, providing accommodation upon employment, and statutory levy payment. Companies operate to keep offering their products at competitive price to protect their profit margin at the same time. Consequently, terms and conditions begin to deteriorate. Extra costs incurred for hiring migrant workers were passed on to the local workers, triggering the race to the bottom. Trade Union Challenge 2. World's major electronic multinational companies made a beeline to the newly created industrial zones in the early 70s, resulting in the massive rural-urban migration. In the 90s came the migrant workers. The government was instrumental for nearly half a century in keeping the electronic workers free of industrial unionism. The industry today employs about 300,000 workers, 85% are women. With friends, we petitioned the government to form an industrial union. In spite of numerous rejections, we pursued our cause. In 2009, the government finally allowed the formation of industrial union. The Electronic Industry Employees Union, albeit according to regions, covering the entire peninsular Malaysia. The resultant employment environment deteriorated, where a starting wage for new hire of local workers were reduced, maintained low wage regime, benefit bonus increments reduced or stopped, increased working hours from the usual 8 hours to 12 hours work day, formalized normal rest day to scheduled work on rest day, which is not considered overtime. Trade Union Challenge 3. In the race to the bottom, one solution to stem the rot was to implement a minimum wage law. Trade union affiliates of MTUC joined in solidarity to demand the Malaysian government to implement a minimum wage law. It had pickets nationwide and campaigns. The government engaged the World Bank to assist in determining the quantum that makes up the minimum wage. Finally, the first minimum wage order 2012 to be effective from 1st January 2013. With this implementation, all workers, including foreigners, will get other benefits such as higher amount of overtime pay, taking the overall income average to between Ringgit Malaysia 1,002 and 1,500 Ringgit a month, which is reported in the Star 31st January 2012. The government burdened the foreign workers instead of the employees to pay the annual levy. Contract sector for labor. The migrant workers were generally employed directly by the principal employer in the early days, but this changed. In 2005, the Malaysian government agreed to the recruitment of foreign workers through outsourced companies. These companies were in popular demand, touted as the way forward by the employers, as the contract workers are on daily wage without increment or bonus, etc. The company will not be held responsible for the outsourced workers. The workers perform tasks at their own risk under the control and supervision of the company. The company need not be burdened with job description. It merely instructs the workers. If it wants less workers, it merely informs the outsourced company at will without liabilities. The company do not have to incur money for retrenchment benefit or for retirement. In accounting terms, the company improves its net asset value, that is low liability, improving its stock value. Several companies retrenched and substituted their permanent workers with local or migrant contract workers. The government was complicit in facilitating the outsourced companies to operate. By exempting the migrant workers from coverage under the statutory social security scheme, allowing the outsourced companies to operate, which was not provided for by law. Trade Union Challenge 4. In 2010, the government proposed to legalize the outsourced companies as bona fide employers. M2C opposed the attempt and undertook a nationwide picket to strongly oppose the amendments. The government finally withdrew the proposed amendment only to reintroduce them in 2011. Continuing the opposition by the trade union movement resulted in significant amendments in removing labor suppliers as bona fide employers, limiting the labor contractors to the plantation sector, with all other sectors exempted. Trade Union Challenge number 5. After the last election, the new government set up the Institutional Reform Committee, IRC, and called for recommendations in February 2018. We wrote to recommend that migrant workers be subjected to the Social Security Act. This is to prevent unscrupulous employers utilizing migrant workers to perform jobs for different companies in violation of their work permit, which renders them undocumented for no fault of their own. The government agreed to a suggestion. Effective January 1st, 2019, all employers must register their foreign employees, excluding domestic workers, with SOCSO. This can alleviate undocumented worker problem to a large extent. Trade Union Challenge number 6. Following our proposal, the Ministry of Human Resources, MOHR, recommended that outsourcing of foreign workers recruitment shall gradually be discontinued and placed under the Ministry of Human Resources. Private Employment Agency Act from 2012 onwards. Private employment agency shall be for job placement only and not as contractors for labor. Foreign laborers. The World Bank Global Knowledge and Research Hub in Malaysia, the Malaysian Development Experience Series, April 2020, reported that there is no definitive estimate of the number of irregular or undocumented foreign workers. The World Bank Group terms undocumented as irregular. Below is a tabulation of 2012 World Bank estimate. Labor statistics. Malaysia, the unemployment rate of the Malaysian labor force is 4.9%. Total workforce in Malaysia, according to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, is 15.76 million. Foreign workers in 2017, the foreign worker population is 2.96 to 3.26 million. which amounts to 19% to 21%, out of which 1.23 to 1.46 million are undocumented, that is 8 to 9%, and documented is 1.73 to 1.8 million, which is 11 to 12%. Other sources, according to the World Bank, estimate that the total foreign labor is 1.9 to 4.6, that is 12 to 29%. Now, this is where we get the 30% estimate by other sources. Trade union challenges going forward. Archaic labor laws need to be updated in line with ILO standards. Laws on union organizing to be enabling rather than inhibiting growth. Working hours to be reduced from 48 hours per day to 40 hours per day. Reduced maximum overtime from the current 104 hours per month to 64 hours. Include residual overtime, currently not considered overtime work. Maternity leave to increase from 60 days to 90 days. Campaign for a 24-hour childcare facilities in every industrial zone. Remove the restriction on migrant workers and refugees from seeking employment of their choice. And many, many more. The struggle continues for a better world is possible. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 그 브루노 페레이라 씨의 발표를 들었고요. 그 말레이시아의 상황에 대해서 굉장히 많은 정보를 들을 수 있었고, 굉장히 정보가 많은 그런 톡이었습니다. Thanks a lot for your presentation, Mr. Pereira. It was very informative and gave us a good grasp of Malaysian situation of labor status. 그럼 다음으로 김희찬 활동가의 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 한국의 근로기준법이 내버린 이주 노동자들이라는 제목인데요. 먼저 준비된 화면을 보신 다음에 김희찬 활동가의 현장 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. Next is Kim Hee-chan from People's of Earth Station. He will share a video recorded presentation first, then talk a few more words on site as well. Now, please welcome Mr. Kim Hee-chan.
ពេលដែលមកកូរ៉េខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថាខ្ញុំនឹងជួបទឹកកាយដែលល្អហើយនឹងទទួលបានប្រាក់ខែច្រើន មើល
이것들이 진짜 성질나게 세 개씩 갖고 가. 세 개. 한번 바로 와, 니나 여기는 개 같은 니나 칸보다 가. 이거 찐 갖고 와, 칸보다 가. 뭐하러 와, 이게 빨리 해. 개 같은 니나.
알아요, 아이고요.
왜 씨.
나 한국 사람 아니잖아. 하우스는 이거 필요 없어. 이거 알아? 농업, 축산업 할 때는 이거 필요 없어. 써있잖아, 여기 지금. 1시간 4,122원이야, 너. 알아?
500만 원씩 내놔라.
그럼 내 사인 해줄게.
100만 원?
500만 원 내가 언니한테 받아오든지 너 집에 부모한테 보내라 하든지.
제가 돈 없어.
너가 그냥 그 돈 주기 싫거든. 그냥 갚으라. 보탈 그냥 갚으면 내가 불법 처리해가지고 해줄 테니까. 실할 병원이 씨발.
나가. 많이 쳐다보지 말고 나가. 여기 이불이고 뭐고 다 저기야. 내놓고 나가.
줘봐. 야, 줘봐 한번 보게. 뭔가 보게. 줘봐. 비 오는데 어딜 가?
បន្ទប់ពួកខ្ញុំហ្នឹងតកែចេញចូលសេរីគឺមានសាវមួយចាក់ហើយទុកឲ្យគាត់ដឹងដែរពេលអញ្ចឹងគាត់ចង់ចូលពេលណាក៏បានដែរហើយឯកសារគាត់ហ្នឹងគឺទុកនៅក្នុងបន្ទប់ពួកខ្ញុំដែរ
បន្ទប់នោះគឺជាមិនមែនបន្ទប់ពលកាយគ្រាបន្ទប់គេង
ចាលោកបន្ទប់គេងរបស់ពួកខ្ញុំប៉ុន្តែថាកែគាត់ចូលទៅខាងក្នុងហ្នឹងដែរពេលខ្លះគាត់ចូលទៅសម្រាប់នៅហ្នឹងដែរទៅអង្គុយលេងទៅដេកលេងនៅហ្នឹងហ្មងលោកគ្រូ
ទេ
ចា
손편은 두고 사용이 왜 안 되냐고. 괜찮아?
안 돼요.
알았어.
네, 잠깐만요. 예.
이거는 뭐라면 개새끼들이 말을 안 들이 씨발 새끼들이.
ខ្ញុំធ្លាប់ស្វែងរកនៅខ្ញុំទៅគោយ៉ុង Center ដល់ពេលទៅប្រាប់ថានិយាយរៀបរាប់ពីកន្លែងបញ្ហារបស់ខ្ញុំមានវីដេអូឲ្យពួកគាត់មើលហើយគាត់និយាយថាគ្រាន់តែបញ្ហាប៉ុណ្ណឹងក៏មិនអាចចេញពីកន្លែងហ្នឹងបានដែរខ្ញុំសុំចេញពីកន្លែងហ្នឹងព្រោះខ្ញុំគិតថាអត់សុវត្ថិភាពសម្រាប់ពួកខ្ញុំ2នាក់ហើយគោយ៉ុង Center ប្រាប់ថាអត់អាចចេញបានព្រោះអត់មានហេតុផលដែលសុំចេញគ្រាន់តែហេតុផលប៉ុណ្ណឹងគឺមិនអាច
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 그 지구인의 정류장이라고 하는 이주노동자 문화교실에서 활동하고 있는 김이찬이라고 합니다. 제가 한국에 지금 와 있는 고용허가제도를 통해서 와서 이제 우리 사회의 3D 혹은 4D라고 하는 그 업종에서 일을 하고 있는 E9 노동자, E9 비자를 가진 노동자들을 대변하는 그럴 수는 없습니다만은 그 동안에 이제 저희 활동을 통해서 만났던 주로 농업 분야에서 일하게 된 그 여성 노동자들의 어떤 생활, 그다음에 그들에게 가해지고 있는 어떤 그 부당한 처우, 그리고 이제 한국 당국의 고용노동부의 어떤 태도에서 가해지는 어떤 불평등, 이런 점에 대해서 얘기를 하려고 왔습니다. 먼저 고용허가제에 대한 설명을 좀 드리고 싶습니다. 고용허가제도는 그 한국 사회에서 그 사양 산업이라고 할까요? 생산성이 많이 떨어지는 그 사업장들, 그다음에 굉장히 어렵고 무겁고 힘들고 더럽고, 그래서 이제 한국인 노동자의 고용이 어려운 그런 사업장에 외국인 노동자들을 국가 간 MOU, 인력 송출 계약을 통해서 도입하는 그런 제도입니다. 약 20개국에 있는 노동자들, 20개국으로부터 약 그 노동자들을 이제 해마다 이렇게 도입하여 그런 노동 현장에 투입하고 있습니다. 이 나인 노동자의 취업 가능 기간은 3년, 그리고 고용주가 동의를 하는 선에서 1년 10개월, 그래서 총 4년 10개월을 일할 수 있습니다. 지금 외국인 전체 취업자 수를 약 90만 명으로 보고 있고요. 이 나인 고용허가제도를 통한 노동자 수는 약 27만 명이고, 이 나인 고용허가제도를 통해서 노동자를 고용한 사업장은 약 6만 5천에서 7만 정도로 이렇게 입니다. 해마다 5만 명, 5천 명, 6천 명을 하고 도입을 하고, 그 중에서 농업 노동자 농업 분야에서만 일할 수 있는 이주 노동자는 해마다 한 6천 명 선을 도입을 하여서 약 2만 7천 명에서 3만 명의 노동자가 농업 분야에서만 일을 할 수 있습니다. 이분들은 거기를 떠나서 좀 더 나은 직장을 찾아갈 자유가 없습니다. 그렇게 되면 이게 바로 이제 그 비자를 박탈당하고 미등록 노동자로 이렇게 되게 됩니다. 그 농업 노동자들 약 3만 명 중 여성 농업 노동자 수가 약 절반쯤이 됩니다. 근데 이 고용허가 제도가 한국에서 그 이주 노동자들의 어떤 활동을 크게 제약하는 요소가 되고 있습니다. 이 고용허가 제도의 특징을 좀 말씀을 드리면, 한국 노동부가 유일하게 그 근로계약 외국인 노동자와 한국인 고용주 간의 노동계약의 허가권을 갖고 있습니다. 외국인 노동자와 한국인 고용주는 구인이나 구직을 할 때 반드시 한국 노동부의 허가를 받아야 되고, 그 근로계약 내역을 노동부에 등록을 해야 됩니다. 그리고 그 고용계약을 알선할 때도 본인들이 좋다고 이렇게 근로계약을 할 수가 없고, 한국 노동부가 알선할 수 있습니다. 한국 노동부가 알선하지 않은 근로계약은 맺어지지 않습니다. 그리고 그 변동된 내용을 모든 변동 사항은 반드시 신고돼야 됩니다. 두 번째 문제는 이주 노동자들에게 사업장을 바꿀 권리가 박탈되어 있다는 것입니다. 고용주가 고용 변동 신고서를 써서 노동부에 신고하지 않는 한 그 노동자는 그 사업장을 그만둘 수가 없습니다. 고용주가 작성한 고용 변동 신고서가 없이 이주 노동자는 사업장 변경 신청을 할 자격도 없습니다. 고용주들은 때때로 고용 변동 신고서에 노동자가 도망했다, 이탈했다, 혹은 일을 안 한다라는 허위의 신고를 하기도 하는데, 이때 노동자가 적절하게 항변하지 않으면 취업 비자가 발달되고 비자를 잃게 되는 경우도 있습니다. 이것이 가장 치명적인 노동자들의 권리에 치명적인 고용 허가 제도의 독소 조항들입니다. 이제 제가 하려는 농업 이중 노동자가 직면한 문제들에 대해서 얘기를 하려고 합니다. 첫 번째는 살인적인 노동 시간입니다. 국가인권위원회의 통계, 그다음에 2017년에 노동부가 조사한 바에 따르면 농업 이주 노동자의 월 평균 노동 시간은 280시간여입니다. 그러니까 제가 상담을 통해서 확인하는 현실은 4월, 9월, 즉 한국의 하절기죠. 4월에서 9월 사이에 경기도 이천 지역, 포천 지역에서 야채 재배 농장의 이주 노동자들의 노동 시간은 하루 11시간 이상입니다. 그래서 한 달에 이틀 정도 쉽니다. 그래서 월 노동 시간이 300시간을 훨씬 상회하는 경우도 있습니다. 그렇지 않아도 이제 한국인의 노동 시간이 연 2024시간으로 세계 2위라고 OECD 국가 중 2위라고 악명이 높은 걸로 알고 있습니다. 그런데 이 경우 월 평균 노동 시간이 약 12로 나눠 보면 169시간 정도 되죠. 그런데 한국에서 일하는 농업 분야 이주 노동자의 연간 노동 시간은 뭐 공식적인 통계는 없습니다만은 그보다 약 1000시간이 더 많습니다. 자, 이것은 좀 심각한 문제인데요. 노동부는 그런데 이를 문제시하지 않고 있고 이것이 드러나는 것도 별로 좋아하지 않는 것 같고 그 원인과 대책을 마련하기 위한 아무런 움직임을 하지 않고 있습니다. 그 이유는 저희 추정으로는 노동부가 이 초장시간의 노동일 벌어지고 있는 그 사업장들을 알선한 알선책이기 때문에 그런 것 같습니다. 그 노동시간의 흔적은 고용인과 모든 노동부에 등록하기로 한 모든 표준 계약서들 그 중에서도 이제 발견됩니다. 지금 이제 그 화면을 띄울 수는 있는지는 모르겠는데요. 지금 이제 저희가 갖고 있는 하나의 계약서의 예시는 근무 시간이 월 근무 시간이 336시간으로 되어 있습니다. 그리고 임금은 그 당시의 최저임금을 법정 최저임금법에 의한 최저임금법의 60%만 지급해도 되는 것으로 근로계약서가 맺어져 있습니다. 그런데 이 근로계약은 노동부가 알선하고 노동부가 등록하도록 한 근로계약서입니다. 그런데 이런 류의 근로계약이 그러니까 현행법을 어기고 있는 현행 노동관계법, 최저임금법을 어기고 있는 근로계약이 하도록 한 곳이 그걸 안내한 것은 바로 노동부입니다. 그런데 이제 동일 근로계약서에 이제 이쪽에 잘 보이지는 않습니다만은 뭐라고 되어 있냐면 근로기준법 63조에 따른 농림, 축산, 양잠, 수산 산업의 경우 같은 법에 따른 근로시간 휴일에 관한 규정은 적용받지 않는다라는 문구를 굳이 넣어놓았습니다. 일반적인 표준 근로계약서에 이렇게 법률상 안내문, 법적인 안내문을 기재해 놓지는 않죠. 그러나 다른 노동자의 권리에 관한 어떠한 코멘트는 없지만은 이 고용노동부가 제시하는 표준 근로계약서의 양식 속에는 근로기준법 63조에 따라서 근로시간 휴일에 관한 규정은 적용받지 않는다라는 것을 강조해 놓고 있습니다. 또 다른 근로계약서를 하나 보겠습니다. 이 근로계약서는 일일 노동시간이 아침 6시부터 저녁 6시까지 그리고 휴게 시간을 1시간으로 정하고 있습니다. 그리고 휴일은 적지 않았습니다만은 휴일 수는 적지 않았습니다만 월 2일입니다. 통상. 그렇게 되면 하루 11시간 일하게 되고 28일 혹은 29일을 일하게 됩니다. 그렇게 되면 300시간이 넘죠. 노동시간이. 그런데 여기는 이제 226시간이다. 이렇게 호도를 해놨습니다. 그래서 이 근로계약서는 노동부의 근로감독관들도 해독을 할 수가 없습니다. 그러니까 노동부의 고용센터에서 외국 인력을 수만 명씩 수십만 명씩 도입해서 등록하게 하는 이 표준 근로계약서의 내용을 그 노동부의 근로감독과의 감독관들이 모른다는 것입니다. 저희는 한국 노동부에 큰 책임이 있다고 봅니다. 노동시간은 아시다시피 그 임금과 더불어 고용노동계약에서 아주 핵심적인 노동조건일 수 있습니다. 근대 노동운동의 역사는 곧 노동운동 단축투쟁의 역사였다 해도 과언이 아니겠습니다. 2020년 현재 한국 사회는 노동시간을 주 52시간을 상한으로 정하는 문제를 놓고 큰 갈등을 힘겨루기를 하고 있습니다. 한국 노동부는 아시아의 다른 나라들과 노동력 공급 계약을 위한 MOU를 맺고 외국 인력 수급 사업을 독점으로 시행하고 있는 그런 곳입니다. 그러나 이렇게 자신들이 알선하는 농업 분야 이주 노동자의 노동 시간에 대해서는 어떠한 제도적 관리, 조사, 공공적 규제 장치를 마련하고 있지 않습니다. 그건 핑계만 될 뿐입니다. 근기법 63조 적용 제외다. 노동시간, 휴게, 휴일에 관한 규정을 정한 근로기준법 4장은 적용되지 않는다라고 말하면서 그에 대해서 어떻게 관찰할 것인가에 대한 그런 노력들을 전혀 하지 않고 있습니다. 노동청이 어떤 사설 기업이 아니라 공공정책을 집행하는 어떤 시행청이라면 응당 법적인 규제를 할 수 없는 그 예외 정황 때문에 그런 노동 현장을 어떻게 관리 감독하고 그 공공성이 유지되도록 할 것인가를 고민하여 그 대책을 마련하려고 해야 될 것입니다. 그런데 오히려 앞에 말씀드린 바와 같이 노동시간을 맘대로 노동시간을 정하고 일을 시켜도 괜찮다라는 취지의 그 어떤 홍보성 문안을 노동자들과 고용인들의 그 모든 근로계약서에 양식으로 기본 양식의 어떤 홍보 문안으로 넣어서 그렇게 알선 사업을 하고 있는 것입니다. 한국 노동부가 공공버스의 수행자인지 인력 공급책 이게 역할에만 충실하고 있는지 의심하지 않을 수 없습니다. 그러면 감독 기능을 갖고 있는 노동부의 다른 기관, 즉 근로감독관은 이 노동시간을 조사할 수 있느냐? 조사를 못한다고 합니다. 그러니까 조사할 의지도 없습니다. 그리고 최저임금 제도, 최저임금법은 무력화됩니다. 왜냐하면 노동시간을 조사할 수도 없고 조사할 수단도 없기 때문이에요. 하나의 이런 상황 속에서 노동자들은 이렇게 자기가 그 노트에 이렇게 노동 시간을 적습니다. 적어서 아침 6시 10분에 출근해서 점심 휴게 시간이 12시, 오후 출근 시간 12시 40분, 저녁 퇴근 시간 오후 5시 40분 이렇게 날마다 적었습니다. 이 노동자의 경우는 하루 휴게 시간이 점심시간 40분에 불과했습니다. 그리고 실제 월 노동시간은 300시간이었습니다. 그러니까 임금은 평균 시급이 5,500원에 불과하여 최저임금법을 위반하고 있는 게 명백하지만 노동청 근로감독관은 최저임금법을 적용하여 조사하지는 않습니다. 왜냐하면 노동자가 이렇게 쓴 근로시간 기록은 증거가 될 수 없다. 라고 얘기하고 CCTV나 어떤 그 사장 공공 그 고용주의 사인이 없는 그런 노동 시간은 인정할 수 없다라고 하여 노동자들의 그 주장을 배척하고 있는 것입니다. 또 한 가지의 문제가 농업 이주 노동자에 가하는 그런 큰 문제들이 있습니다. 그것은 뭐냐면 사업장이 등록이 없는 노동자, 그다음에 5인 미만 사업장의 외국인 노동자를 알선하여 이분들이 받는 임금 체불 피해가 아주 큰 것입니다. 그리고 또 한 가지 문제는 거의 인신매매에 가까운 그 운용입니다. 주로 농업 노동자들이 일하고 있는 작업장이 고립된 지역이고 행정력이 좀 덜 미치는 곳이기 때문에 실제로는 큰 사업장 한 20명, 30명 규모의 사업장인데 그 고용주를 가족, 이웃, 형제, 그다음에 한국인 직원의 이름으로 노동자들을 개별적으로 고용하는 것처럼 꾸미고 한 직장에서 일하게 하는 경우도 있습니다. 그래서 실제로 5인 이상 사업장이 부담해야 할 여러 가지 어떤 법적인 의무들 이런 것들을 피해가고 있는 것이죠. 그 농업 노동자들이 특히 그런 경우가 많습니다. 결정적인 것은 임금 체불 시 이를 보전받을 방법이 없다는 것입니다. 소위 이제 체당금 제도에서도 제외되어 있습니다. 그리고 만약에 노동자가 체불을 당했을 때 이 소규모 사업장에서 있는 노동자들이 체불을 당했을 때 민사적인 민사적인 노력을 별도로 해야 됩니다. 그런데 또 한 가지 문제는 민사소송 후에 후속 조치인 강제 집행 이런 것들을 개인이 수행해야 되고 개인이 수행할 수 없으니 이제 변호사의 의존을 하는 경우도 있고 그 변호사의 도움을 받을 경우는 오히려 이 체류 기간이 그 소송을 수행하기 위한 체류 기간을 인정받지 못하는 경우가 있습니다. 법무부는 임금 체불 피해 이주 노동자에 대한 체류 허가 발급을 아주 제한적으로만 하고 있고 취업 활동을 하지 못하게 했습니다. 그러니까 임금 체불을 당했을 때 예를 들어서 1,000만 원, 2,000만 원 이렇게 임금 체불을 당하는 노동자들이 많은데 이 노동자들이 그것을 실제로 받지 못한 경우가 많습니다. 그 통계에 의하면 약 1,000억 정도가 이주노동자들이 체불임금이 발생했고 그 중에 못 받은 결국 그 보전을 받을 수 없는 그런 무실채권으로 전락했다고 합니다. 이거 하나의 예는 이게 약 28개월간 임금을 못 받은 그 노동자의 그 체불금품 확인원으로 이제 그 한국노동부에서 발행한 것입니다. 근로감독가에서 약 3,400만 원을 못 받았습니다. 28개월간 고용주가 임금을 주지 않았습니다. 그런데 이렇게 피해가 커지도록 노동자가 거기서 나올 수 없었던 이유는 고용주가 한편으로는 거짓말을 하면서 한편으로는 당신이 나가도 내가 사인을 안 해갖고 당신을 미등록으로 만들겠다. 불법 처리를 하겠다. 라고 이렇게 협박을 했기 때문입니다. 그래서 이 노동자는 취업 비자가 만료될 때까지 묵묵히 일했으나 끝내 지급을 받지 못했습니다. 그래서 이제 그 이후에 이제 고소를 해서 형사재판도 하고 민사소송을 진행을 해야 되는데 이 사람의 취업 비자 기간은 끝났습니다. 그래서 이분이 비자 신청을 해서 이와 같이 소송 피해가액이 크고 그 소송을 해야 하니 한국의 체류권을 달라 소송을 해야 되니까라고 이제 체류 신청을 했는데 법무부는 그 소송을 도와주는 변호사가 있지 않느냐. 그러면 그 변호사가 일을 하는데 당신이 소송이 왜 필요하냐. 당신은 귀가해라. 비자가 없으니까. 이렇게 거부한 사례가 있습니다. 그래서 저희는 지금 농업 이주노동자들과 함께하는 저희 단체에서 생각하기에 우리 앞으로 이 제도 개선 투쟁을 많이 해야 됩니다. 첫째는 고용허가 자체가 폐지되어야 된다고 생각을 합니다. 중요한 것은 고용주의 동의 없이 사업장 변경이 가능해야 된다는 것입니다. 두 번째는 근로기준법 63조의 그 농축산업에 대한 근로시간에 대해서 전혀 한국 재법이 관여하지 않는 이 문제를 해결해야 됩니다. 세 번째는 5인 미만 사업장에 대한 각종 근로기준법상의 유보 적용 제외 조치를 폐지해야 됩니다. 네 번째, 고용주들이 외국인 노동자에게 농막, 비닐하우스, 샌드위치 패널, 컨테이너 등 불법 시설물을 주거지로 제공하고 그 대가로 임금에서 13%를 공제하도록 한국 노동부가 그 노동부 장관 지침을 통해서 안내를 했습니다. 즉 불법적인 곳을 숙소로 고용노동자에게 제공하고 거기서 임금에서 그 대가를 취할 수 있도록 부당이득을 취하도록 한국 노동부가 한 것입니다. 이 지침을 철회해야 됩니다. 그 다음에 EPS 고용허가제가 외국인 노동자의 직장 이동의 자유를 박탈하고 한국 노동부가 독점해서 알선해서 일하게 한 곳에서만 일을 해야 되기 때문에 여기서 발생한 임금 체불에 대해서는 그 알선자인 독점적이고 독선적인 알선자이기도 하고 규제자이기도 한 한국 노동부가 책임을 져야 됩니다. 그래서 체불임금, 이주노동자의 체불임금에 대해서 한국 노동부가 그 노동자들한테 임금을 선지급을 하고 나중에 체불 고용주한테 구상을 하게 하는 제도를 마련하지 않고 이렇게 브로커 일만 하고 있으면 한국 노동부는 정말 악성 브로커가 아닐까 싶습니다. 그리고 한국 노동부는 사업자 등록을 갖고 있지 않은 고용주에게 이주 노동자들 알선하지 말아야 되는 겁니다. 오늘날 3만 명의 농업 이주 노동자들이 겪고 있는 그 노동자들의 노동 조건과 이에 눈 감고 고용주의 편의에만 신경 쓰는 노동부의 태도는 50년 전 전태일이 몸을 불살라 항거했던 피복 노동자들이 겪은 것과 크게 다르지 않다고 생각을 합니다. 저는 마치겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 김희찬 활동가의 발표를 들으셨습니다. 한국의 근로기준법이 내버린 이주노동자들에 대한 신랄한 고발과 더불어서 한국 정부가 좀 더 적극적인 역할을 해야 함을 강조해 주셨습니다. 그러면 전체 총평과 정리를 하기 전에 저희들이 사전에 발표자들에게 몇 개의 질문을 제시하였습니다. 그리고 그 질문에 대한 답을 듣는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 김희찬 활동가의 경우는 지금 현장에 계시기 때문에 이따가 같이 그 논의를 할 수 있는 기회가 있을 테지만 페레이라 씨에게는 그런 기회가 없어서 별도의 질문을 드렸고요. 그 질문에 대한 답을 듣는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그 질문은 사전에 지금 전달이 되었기 때문에 페레이라 씨께서는 답을 준비해 주실 것으로 보이고요. 이따가 줌에서 답을 들을 텐데 제가 보내드린 답에 대해서 먼저 소개를 드리도록 하겠습니다. 말레이시아의 사례에서 특히 이제 맨 슬라이드에 있던 내용이 저는 인상 깊었는데요. 앞으로 나아갈 길에 대한 언급이 흥미로웠습니다. 그래서 전체적으로 노동시간의 감소를 요구하고 있는 지점은 우리나라의 경우에도 비슷한 요구가 진행되고 있는 상황이기 때문에 노동시간에 감소하는 요구가 한편에 있었고 또 다른 한편으로는 24시간 어린이집의 설치를 요구하기도 하였는데요. 그러니까 제 머릿속에서 이게 이 두 가지 요구가 상충되는 것이 아닌가 궁금해서 페레이라 씨에게 그 배경, 혹시 제가 이해하지 못하는 배경이 있는지 그걸 여쭈어 봤었습니다. 그래서 거기에 대한 답을 좀 드렸으면 합니다. Do we have Mr. Pereira here? Oh yes, I can see you. Hey, I understand that you have the question that I sent you earlier. I wonder if you can answer the question. Answer the question to the audience, please. Pereira?
Yes. The question was, why do you need daycare centers? Is that the question?
Yes, 24-hour daycare centers, because if you reduce the working hours, you may have more hours with the kids at home. So that's the question.
The second question is, why do you ask for reduced working hours? Overtime work. The daycare centers are essential to the working family. In Malaysia, we have about 53% of the women workers, 53% of the population are women workers, which means there's a low women participation in labor. Although we have a very high percentage of women in colleges and universities, in fact higher than men, 60% are women. But when you talk about the workforce, it's only 43% of the workforce are women, compared to 78% or 80% of the workforce are men. Now, when the women don't have opportunity to leave home, the children in a safe care, they quit their employment. So it is a sheer waste of talent, where the government spends so much money to educate them, but they drop out after first child, second child. And it's very difficult to come back to the labor market, say at about 5 or 10 years' time, because technology changes, everything changes so fast, you lose track. And normally they are out of the labor market. This problem should have been anticipated by the government 50 years ago. We had today about 57 industrial zones, not one decent daycare center. But in advanced countries, they have daycare centers in line with industrial zones. Of course, they don't put the daycare center in the zone, it's outside in a safe place, which is run by professionals. The medical aspect of it, the nutrition aspect of it, and they also provide tuition, the recreation, the children grow up healthy. You don't have to worry about the family coming up when you have good daycare centers to improve to bring in the women into the labor force. And we don't have to depend on the large section of migrant workers. It's very unfair for Malaysia to bring in women migrant workers from all over the world, or all over Southeast Asia, when they too have their families to take care. So they abandon their families in search of income, coming to Malaysia. What happened to their family? Are they to sacrifice for Malaysians at the expense of their family? How long are we going to go on with this? So it is not a win-win situation by importing migrant workers and neglecting our women workforce. When we have enough women, maybe to cover up at least a large section of the foreign workers. The second one on the overtime rate. Malaysia is in a very envious position of being the top nation in the world, which has the highest number of allowable legal overtime. By law, we can work 104 hours overtime, which means that you can work 12 hours a day, Monday to Friday. But if you work overtime on Sunday, which is a rest day, it's not added to your number 104. It's not out, it's outside. So which means in Malaysia, a worker can work 12 hours a day, 30 days a month, 365 days a year, which is terrible. So much so that the Nepali embassy gave up a press statement just not so long ago that an average of 1 Nepali worker dies a day in Malaysia. And the reason given by the medical doctors is that cardiac arrest. Now, cardiac arrest is a very simple diagnosis. You and I also can do it. His heart stopped beating. But the question is, why did his heart stop beating? They don't go beyond that. There is no autopsy, there is no inquest. And the situation is getting very bad. An injury to one is an injury to all. You cannot sacrifice foreign workers for capital. That is tainted money. But the Malaysian government is looking the other side. So we are now looking into how to stop this by insisting that the hours of overtime must be cut down from 104 to 64, which was what it was in 1984. After that, they changed to 104 hours. We have to bring it down to 64, which is an international average, 64 hours overtime per week. Now, if that is done, at least we can bring down this death at workplace. And this is also been passed on to the local workers. They also work 12 hours a day, 30 days a month. And there is also death among local workers, which is not paid any attention to. So that is the reason why we are asking to reduce the working hours, which is biologically strenuous on the human person. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answering the questions. I can have a better idea about the situation of Malaysia and the workers' status, especially the long working hours, and also why we need the childcare, 24-hour childcare. All right. 예, 그러면 그 전체적으로 총평을 하는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 베트남, 인도네시아, 인도 그리고 말레이시아의 사례를 들었고요. 그리고 한국의 사례까지 전체적으로 들었습니다. 오늘 총평을 세 분이 모여서 하게 될 텐데요. 아까 일부 사회를 보셨던 이 박사님과 저 그리고 지금 이 자리에 줌으로 연결되어 있는 분들 모두가 총평에 참가하도록 하겠습니다. 그럼 먼저 이정희 박사님의 총평을 듣고 진행을 하도록 하겠습니다.
네, 오늘 아시아 각국을 다 돌면서 특히 그 해외 투자 기업들이 실제 기업을 운영하는 과정에서 기본적인 노동권, 임금, 노동 시간에 대한 법적 준수, 최저임금 그리고 산업 노동 안전 등등의 문제들에 대해서 각국의 사례를 전체적으로 이제 훑어 보았는데요. 오늘 이 세션의 그 타이틀이 글로벌 공급 사슬 밑바닥에서 일하는 사람들이라고 우리가 잡았었는데, 이 주제에 대한 토론을 하면서 많이 계속 고민이 들었던 것은 이 체인, 그러니까 사슬이 무엇을 의미하는 걸까라는 것에 대한 고민이었습니다. 앞서 에드워드 웹스터 선생님께서 말씀해 주셨던 것처럼 글로벌 공급 사슬이라고 하는 것은 상품이나 서비스 이런 것을 구매하고 공급하는 그런 네트워크를 얘기하는 것이죠. 대륙과 국가를 넘나들면서 그런 사슬인데 우리가 역사적으로 다시 짚어보면 우리한테 익숙한 사슬은 카를 막스가 일전에 언급했던 노동자가 잃을 것은 쇠사슬 뿐이다. 그리고 우리가 얻을 것은 전 세계다라는 아주 유명한 명언이 있는데요. 그때에도 막스가 표현했던 것은 체인은 억압이었죠. 서프레션의 의미였다라고 하면 오늘 우리가 얘기하는 글로벌 서플라이 체인에서의 체인은 연결을 의미하는 것 같거든요. 커넥티비티의 문제다. 그런 커넥티비티가 그런 연결이 특히 최근에 디지털 기술 발전에 의해서 점점 더 촘촘한 연결망으로 강화되고 있는 그런 느낌입니다. 그래서 이러한 어떤 그 초연결 시대라고 부를 수 있을 텐데요. 이런 시대에 과연 전태일의 정신은 우리한테 무엇을 요청하고 있는 것일까라는 고민을 오늘 여러분들 발표와 토론을 들으면서 많은 고민을 하게 되었는데, 축약해서 말씀드리면 막스의 체인에서의 억압을 글로벌 서플라이 체인에서의 연결로 이었다라고 하면 이제는 그 연결을 넘어서 연대, 솔리데리티로 나가야 되는 거 아닌가. 그것이 우리가 지향해야 되는 전태일의 정신이 아닐까라는 생각을 합니다. 유명한 ILO 그 1944년 ILO 목적에 관한 선언이 있습니다. 필라델피아에서 이루어져서 흔히 필라델피아 선언이라고 불리는 선언인데요. 거기에서 여러 그 중요한 선언들을 하였는데, 노동은 상품이 아니다라는 말과 함께 일국의 빈곤은 전체의 번영을 위태롭게 한다라는 표현이 있습니다. 이것을 오늘 우리가 논의했던 글로벌 공급 사슬과 같이 맞물려서 보면 밑바닥으로 갈수록 열악한 노동 조건과 저임금, 가장 기본권인 노동 조건조차도 지켜지지 않는 그런 일국의 빈곤적 상황, 결여적 상황, 이것은 전 세계의 노동권과 인권의 침해, 황폐화로 이어질 것이라고 우려가 됩니다. 그렇기 때문에 우리는 글로벌 공급 사슬보다 훨씬 더 단단하게 가장 인간으로서의 글로벌 공급 사슬을 보다 인간의 얼굴을 한 그런 체제로 바꾸어내기 위한 새로운 연결, 그것은 연대다라고 할 수가 있겠습니다. 그래서 자국 내에서 다수의 이 노동자를 조직하여서 형성되는 힘을 바탕으로 하고, 또 한편에서는 국가를 뛰어넘는, 그래서 앞서 얘기됐던 그 초국경적인 사회적 대화나 국제 기본 협약이나 그리고 초국적 기업을 상대로 한 그런 단체 협약의 체결 노력, 이런 것들을 통해서 그런 연결을 뛰어넘는 국제 연대를 강화해야 되는 필요성을 다시 한번 제기하는 그런 계기가 되었다라고 생각합니다. 네, 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 그 오늘 세션 전반적으로 그 박사님의 의견을 주셨고요. 전체적으로 잘 정리한 내용으로 그 여기 계신 분들이 전부 다 동의하실 내용이신 것 같습니다. 다음으로 그 에드워드 웹스터 선생님의 총평을 좀 들을 텐데요. Professor Edward, are you ready to comment on the session, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, let me congratulate the organizers of this very innovative workshop. I think that what you've done this afternoon is show how it's possible to connect workers across the globe, in spite of the pandemic of COVID-19 that we face. I just wanted, by way of a conclusion, to make 3 observations. Firstly, I've been listening very carefully to the very informative presentations of the strikes in Vietnam, in the tragedy of the chemical plant in India, and the way in which the German companies were exporting pollution from the north to the south. I was also very moved by the discussion of the migrants in Malaysia by Bruno, and the young woman in Indonesia. What struck me, colleagues and friends, is how common the experiences were between these different countries. But also what struck me here, as I speak from the southern tip of Africa, how similar the experiences that you described this afternoon are with my own fellow workers in South Africa. Right now, the major trade union federation, COSATU, is having its conference here in Johannesburg. In fact, I was supposed to speak to them this morning about the impact of the new digital technology on the world of work. Instead, I've asked my colleagues to speak. But I'm struck by the common challenge that neoliberal globalization presents to workers. That was my first point. My second point, colleagues, that I was quite dismayed to discover the role of the Korean multinational companies in Asia. I think it came across quite dramatically in the presentations from Vietnam, from India, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, that the Korean companies are flouting basic labor standards. And I think, as my previous speaker said, I think it's a time to move from connecting towards solidarity amongst workers. I think what was most striking was the presentation by Kim on the treatment of migrant workers in Korea. I think the stories there, particularly of the abuse of women migrant workers and the way in which they are unable to move from the job in which they have first entered, suggest to me that you have a case here of forced labor in breach of the ILO conventions, and they need to be dealt with. So I think my second point really was about Korean labor, but I wanted just to make a third point, and that is that what's important about this event, and I think it's such a moving way to pay tribute to Chun Ta-il in this 70th anniversary of his death. And that is that new opportunities have opened up in the age of globalization, for workers to connect and express solidarity. And I just wanted to conclude by suggesting that the key, I think, when we think about trade agreements, I think it's time to go beyond core labor standards. The trade agreements need to cover issues like migrant worker rights. And the proposal that came out of Bruno for migrant workers to be covered for Social Security is an example of that. I think, secondly, I think these agreements, these trade agreements in the global supply chains need to also have sanctions attached to them. When managers violate workers, there must be sanctions attached to that. And thirdly, I think the state needs to to build its capacity to monitor these labor standards with their inspectors. And just finally, I think the most important thing I draw from this discussion is that ultimately it's workers' agency, it's workers' power, it's workers' capacity that is going to determine and shape the future conditions of labor. The idea that there's some kind of a trickle down through investment, I think, is fundamentally wrong, and ultimately it is a question of workers' power. And as we say in South Africa, amandla, that means power to the workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your powerful comments, please. 오케이, 예, 감사합니다. 사우스 아프리카에서 아주 힘찬 연대의 말씀을 해주신 에드워드 웹스터 교수님께 다시 한번 감사를 드립니다. 저도 간단하게 오늘의 세션에 대한 의견을 드리고 말씀을 드리고 이 자리를 마무리할까 합니다. 오늘 세션은 크게 두 부분으로 나눠져 있었던 것 같은데요. 일부에서는 베트남, 인도네시아, 인도의 사례로 모두가 한국 기업이들 국가에서 어떤 방식으로 글로벌 공급 사슬을 악용하고 있는지를 보여줬습니다. 물론 이제 개별 국가의 노동 관계라고 하는 것이 해당 국가의 법과 제도의 보호와 관리를 받아야 되겠지만 결과적으로 해당 국가 노동자 동지들의 고통과 글로벌 불평등 심화를 야기하는 기업과 자본가들이 저하고 같은 하늘을 이기고 있는 사람들에 의해서 이루어지고 있다는 사실에 한편으로는 안타까움이, 그리고 다른 한편으로는 뭐 대단한 논리적 근거가 있는 건 아니지만 한편으로는 그 해당 국가의 노동자에게 미안한 마음이 함께합니다. 물론 제가 이분들에게 드리는 사과나 위로는 매우 공허할 것이라고 생각을 하고요. 다만 우리가 베트남, 인도네시아, 인도의 노동자들에게 연대의 뜻을 전하는 것이 오히려 실질적 의미가 있을 거라고 생각합니다. 오늘 이 자리에 소개된 해당 국가의 상황들이 우리 사회에도 울림과 필요하다면 우리 사회에 다소 불편하지만 좀 시끄러운 소음을 만들어냈으면 하는 바람입니다. 이분은 외국인 이주 노동자에 대한 논의의 장이었습니다. 말레이시아 전체 노동자의 30%를 차지하는 외국인 노동자, 그리고 그와 같은 노동시장의 인구 구성의 변화가 노동시장과 노사관계와 노동조합 활동에 가져온 변화를 논해주셨고요. 그리고 그동안 노동운동의 성과에 대해서도 상당 부분 말씀해 주신 것으로 보입니다. 이를 통해서 굉장히 많은 부분들을 저희들이 이해할 수 있었고요. 그리고 김희찬 활동가께서는 15개 국가로부터 입국한 이주 노동자들, 한국의 이주 노동자들이 직면하고 있는 현실에 대해서 고발해 주셨습니다. 물론 포럼의 자리에서의 발표이긴 했지만 현실에 대한 아주 날것을 고발해 주셨다는 생각이 들고요. 특히 이주 노동자들의 보호를 위해서 정부가 좀 더 적극적인 역할을 해야 함을 강조해 주셨는데 이 부분에 대해서는 전적으로 동의하고 응원하는 바입니다. 이주 노동자의 문제는 신자유주의 체제 아래에서 진행되어 온 세계화, 그리고 그로 인한 국제 수준의 불평등 심화가 새로운 기준이 되어버린 현대 자본주의 사회에서 어느 사회이든 피할 수 없는 문제인 것으로 보입니다. 이 문제의 해결은 개별 국가의 노력도 필요하겠지만 전 세계적인 차원의 연대가 바탕이 되지 않고는 도저히 해결할 수 없는, 우리가 보통 풍선 효과라고 부르는, 한쪽에서 이주 노동자들을 막으면 다른 한쪽으로 이주 노동자들이 늘어나고 그것은 또 다른 차원에서 불평등과 착취의 구조를 심화시키는 그 문제를 해결하기 위해서는 국제적인 차원의 연대가 필요한 것이 아닌가 생각합니다. 오늘 아침부터 이 늦은 시간까지 이 자리에 함께해 주신 청취자분들, 그리고 멀리 요하네스버그에서 말레이시아, 인도, 인도네시아, 그리고 베트남에서 이 방송을 같이 들어주신 전 세계의 노동자분들께 다시 한번 존경과 연대의 뜻으로 인사를 드립니다. 그럼 오늘 우리 모두 전태일 문화재 전태일 50주기 국제포럼, 국제 노동자들과 함께하는 전태일 50주기 국제포럼, 전태일 이후 50년 함께 고민하는 노동의 미래 포럼의 행사를 모두 마치겠습니다. 함께해 주신 여러분께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드립니다.